Hello everyone, I am MANO Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. My name is Eliza Thornton. I'm 34 years old. This happened in October of 2024. It's getting dark, Tristan. We should have found the campsite by now. I clutched my phone, the battery indicator flashing red at 7%. The GPS had been glitching for the past hour, the blue dot jumping erratically across the screen of Connecticut State Forest in Connecticut. My boyfriend of 3 years squeezed my shoulder. Just a little further, Eliza. The map shows we're close to Devil's Hop Yard Waterfall. We'll make camp there. Tristan Walker was always the optimist of our relationship. At 36, he had the energy and enthusiasm of someone a decade younger, with curly brown hair and a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. His outdoor experience had initially drawn me to him, a welcome change from the finance bros I usually dated in Hartford. When he suggested this week-long trek through Connecticut's most remote hiking trails to celebrate our anniversary, I'd agreed despite my reservations. Now, as twilight descended over the dense pine forest, those reservations had blossomed into full-blown anxiety. My golden retriever, Bailey, walked close to my side, occasionally whimpering. Even she seemed on edge. "Bailey doesn't like this place," I said, scratching behind her ears. Tristan checked his compass again. "Animals can sense things we can't. Probably just some nocturnal predators waking up. Mountain lions, maybe." "There aren't mountain lions in Connecticut," I corrected him, though the thought of what might be lurking in the growing darkness made me shiver. "Coyotes, then. Or bears. Either way, we'll be fine once we get the tent up." I glanced at my watch, 6:43 p.m. The dense canopy above made it seem much later. October in New England brings early sunsets, and the temperature was already dropping. I pulled my jacket tighter. "Let's just stop here," I suggested. "Set up camp and start fresh in the morning." Tristan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, you're right. There's a small clearing just ahead." We pushed through a thicket of mountain laurel and found ourselves in a modest opening among the towering pines. The ground was relatively flat, covered in fallen needles that would provide some cushioning beneath our tent. Bailey immediately began exploring the perimeter, nose to the ground. I dropped my heavy backpack with relief while Tristan took out our tent. As he began assembling the poles, I collected kindling for a fire. The forest floor was damp from recent rain, and finding dry wood proved challenging. Still, I managed to gather enough to attempt a small blaze. Bailey suddenly froze, hackles raised, staring into the darkness beyond our clearing. "What is it, girl?" I asked, following her gaze. The dense wall of trees revealed nothing, but an unsettling feeling crept up my spine. Tristan approached, tent poles in hand. "She probably smells a raccoon or something." "Maybe." But Bailey wasn't the type to be bothered by wildlife. She was well socialized and typically unfazed by forest creatures. This was different. She was scared. As darkness fell completely, we finished setting up camp. Tristan managed to get a small fire going, though the flames burned an odd bluish-green color. "Must be the minerals in the wood," he explained when I pointed it out. "Copper compounds can make flames turn green." I nodded, though something about the fire's unnatural hue added to my growing unease. We heated a simple dinner of dehydrated pasta and ate in silence, both tired from the long day of hiking. Bailey refused her food, instead sitting vigilantly at the edge of our campsite, occasionally growling softly. "We should get some sleep," Tristan said finally. "Early start tomorrow." Inside the tent, I snuggled close to Tristan, with Bailey lying across the entrance. Despite my exhaustion, sleep evaded me. The forest was too quiet. No owls hooting, no rustling of nocturnal animals. Just the occasional whisper of wind through the pine needles, almost like voices just below the threshold of comprehension. I must have drifted off eventually because I woke suddenly to Bailey's low growl. The tent was pitch black. I reached for my phone, 3:17 a.m. "Tristan," I whispered, shaking him gently. He mumbled something incoherent and rolled over. Bailey's growling intensified. I sat up, straining to hear what had disturbed her. At first, there was nothing but that unnatural silence. Then, faintly, I heard it, cracking twigs and the soft crunch of footsteps on pine needles circling our campsite. "Tristan, wake up," I hissed, shaking him harder. "There's something out there." He groaned and sat up. "Probably just a deer." "It's not a deer. Listen." The footsteps stopped directly outside our tent. Bailey was now on her feet, facing the tent wall, her growl rumbling deep in her chest. A shadow passed across the fabric, too tall and upright to be any forest animal. "Hello," Tristan called out. "Is someone there?" No response, just the sound of breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing. My heart pounded. "Maybe it's another hiker," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. What hiker would be wandering around a remote forest at 3 a.m.? "Hey," Tristan called louder. "This campsite is occupied." The breathing stopped. For a long moment, there was complete silence. Then something scraped against the outside of our tent. Long, slow strokes, like fingers or claws. Bailey barked furiously now, backing toward us. "That's it," Tristan said, reaching for the flashlight and unzipping the tent in one quick motion. The beam of light cut through the darkness as he stepped outside, Bailey bolting past him. I followed, my own flashlight in hand, scanning the trees surrounding our clearing. There was nothing there. No person, no animal. Bailey stood at the edge of the darkness, barking at something I couldn't see. "Bailey, come," I called, my voice shakier than I intended. Tristan walked the perimeter of our campsite, light sweeping methodically across the ground and up into the trees. "Probably a bear that took off when we made noise," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. I joined his search, my beam falling on the side of our tent. 5 long, parallel marks had been etched into the fabric, too deliberate for random damage, too evenly spaced to be anything but claw marks or finger marks. "Tristan," I whispered, pointing. He examined the marks, brow furrowed. "Could be branches scraping against it in the wind." "There is no wind," I replied. The air was completely still. We spent the rest of the night sitting by the rekindled fire, backs to each other, scanning the darkness. Bailey remained on high alert, occasionally growling at shadows that seemed to shift and move just beyond the firelight. Dawn couldn't come soon enough. As the first gray light filtered through the trees, we quickly packed up camp. Neither of us mentioned leaving early, but I knew we were both thinking it. This forest felt wrong. "Let's try to make it to Devil's Hopyard State Park today," Tristan said, studying his map. "It's more developed with proper campsites, maybe 10 miles from here." I nodded, relieved at the prospect of reaching somewhere less isolated. "Which way?" Tristan frowned at his compass. "That's weird." "What?" "The compass is going haywire." He showed me the needle, which was spinning erratically, never settling on north. I pulled out my phone. Dead. "Great." "It's okay," Tristan assured me. "The sun rises in the east. We need to head southeast to reach the park." He pointed. "That way." We shouldered our packs and set off, Bailey leading the way, seemingly eager to leave our campsite behind. The morning was misty, the forest eerily beautiful in the diffuse light. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated it. After about an hour of hiking, I noticed something odd. "Tristan, does this area look familiar to you?" He stopped, looking around. "All forests look pretty similar." "No, I mean really familiar. Like we've been here before." I pointed to a distinctive crooked tree. "I remember that tree from yesterday." Tristan studied it, then shook his head. "It's just a similar tree." "And that rock formation?" I indicated a pile of stones that looked unmistakably like the one we'd passed the previous day. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Let me check the map again. While he consulted his increasingly useless map, I wandered a few steps away, looking for anything that might confirm my suspicions. That's when I found it. My hair tie, bright blue against the brown forest floor. I'd lost it yesterday when we stopped for lunch. "Tristan," I called, my voice tight. "We're going in circles." He joined me, staring at the hair tie in my palm. That's not possible. We've been walking straight south." "Well, something's wrong with your navigation because this is exactly where we stopped yesterday." The realization sent a chill through me. How can we be going in circles when we've been walking straight? Bailey suddenly barked, her attention fixed on something in the trees to our right. Before either of us could react, she bolted into the underbrush. "Bailey!" I shouted, running after her without hesitation. Tristan followed close behind. We crashed through the forest, calling Bailey's name. I could hear her barking growing more distant by the second. How could she move so fast? "Bailey, come!" I yelled, panic rising in my chest. The barking stopped abruptly. We halted, breathing hard, straining to hear any sound that might lead us to her. The forest had fallen into that unnatural silence again. "Bailey," I called, my voice echoing among the trees. Nothing. "We'll find her," Tristan assured me, though the worry in his eyes betrayed him. Dogs don't just disappear. But in this forest, I wasn't so sure anymore. We spent the next hour searching, calling until our voices grew hoarse. No sign of Bailey, no barking, no crashing through underbrush. Nothing. "She might have circled back to the trail," Tristan suggested finally, "or even to our last campsite." It was a slim hope, but the only one we had. We tried to retrace our steps but quickly realized we were hopelessly turned around. The mist had thickened into a light fog, limiting visibility and making every direction look the same. "We need to get to higher ground," Tristan decided. "There's a ridge over there. We might be able to get our bearings." The climb was steeper than it looked, the ground slippery with decomposing leaves and pine needles. By the time we reached the top, we were both breathing hard and covered in sweat despite the cool air. The ridge offered a view over the forest canopy, but the fog obscured anything beyond 100 yards. Still, something about the vista struck me as wrong. "Tristan," I said slowly, "do you see any gaps in the trees? Roads? Power lines? Anything?" He scanned the horizon, realization dawning on his face. "This doesn't make sense. There should be civilization visible from here. We're in Connecticut, not the Amazon." He was right. Even in the most remote parts of Connecticut, you were never that far from some sign of human habitation. Yet all I could see was unbroken forest stretching in every direction, swallowed by fog at the edges. "Maybe we went further off trail than we thought," he suggested, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. A distant sound caught my attention. Barking. Bailey. "Did you hear that?" I asked, already moving toward the sound. The barking came again, clearer this time. We scrambled down the other side of the ridge following the sound. The fog seemed to part before us, creating a corridor through the trees. "Bailey," I called. "Here, girl." The barking led us to another clearing, smaller than our campsite. In the center stood a single, massive pine tree, far larger and older than any of the surrounding trees. And tied to that tree with what looked like crude rope was Bailey. She barked frantically when she saw us, straining against her bonds. I rushed forward without thinking, but Tristan grabbed my arm. "Wait, this isn't right. Who tied her up?" The question hung in the air between us. Someone else was in these woods. Cautiously we approached. Bailey's eyes were wide with fear, her fur matted with something dark that I prayed wasn't blood. The rope around her neck wasn't rope at all, but some kind of braided plant material, studded with small bones and teeth. "What the hell?" Tristan muttered as he carefully untied her. The moment she was free, Bailey pressed against my legs, trembling. "It's okay, girl," I soothed, though I felt anything but calm. "You're safe now." Tristan examined the bizarre restraint. "This looks ritualistic." A twig snapped somewhere in the forest behind us. We both spun around. Nothing visible in the fog, but the distinct feeling of being watched prickled at the back of my neck. "We need to go," I whispered. "Now." We hurried away from the clearing, no direction in mind except away from that ancient pine and whatever had tied our dog to it. Bailey stayed close, no longer running ahead or exploring. The fog grew thicker as we walked until visibility was reduced to just a few yards in any direction. Sounds became muffled, disorienting. The crunch of our footsteps, our labored breathing, and occasionally something else. Something following us. "We're going to retrace our steps to a campsite," Tristan said finally. "If we keep going, we'll just get more lost." I nodded, unable to conjure a better plan. Bailey's rescue had disoriented us further. We could be miles from the trail by now with no working compass, no phone, and no clear landmarks to guide us. The fog created the unsettling illusion that we were walking in place, the same trees appearing and disappearing around us. Time seemed to stretch and compress strangely. My watch read 11:23 a.m., then 11:24, then 2:57 p.m. in the space of what felt like minutes. "Is your watch working properly?" I asked Tristan. He glanced at his wrist. "Mine says 1:30. Neither matched the position of the sun, which we could barely make out as a diffuse glow through the fog and trees, but it seemed too low for midday. Eventually, we stumbled upon another clearing that looked suitable for a campsite. By then, the light was definitely fading, though our watches disagreed about the time. We were exhausted, hungry, and no closer to finding our way out of the forest. "We'll stay here tonight," Tristan decided. "In the morning, the fog might lift, and we can try to locate the sun properly for navigation." I was too tired to do anything but agree. We set up camp mechanically, barely speaking. Bailey refused to leave my side, even when I gathered wood for a fire. Her behavior was increasingly concerning. Every few minutes, she would stare intently into the forest, her body tense but no sound escaping her. The fire refused to stay lit despite our best efforts. The wood seemed too damp, though it hadn't rained in days. When we finally got flames, they flickered with that same unnatural bluish-green hue as the night before. "I don't like this place," I said as we huddled near the meager heat. "It feels wrong." Tristan nodded, his usual optimism finally cracking. "If we can't find our way out tomorrow, we'll need to try something else. Signal fire, maybe." We ate the last of our prepared meals in silence. Neither of us wanted to acknowledge the growing possibility that we were genuinely lost, possibly nowhere near where we thought we were on the map. My mind kept returning to Bailey tied to that ancient pine. Someone had done that. Someone who didn't want to be seen. As if reading my thoughts, Tristan asked, "What do you think happened to Bailey earlier?" I shook my head. "I don't know, but someone's out here with us." "Or something," he murmured. I shot him a look. "What's that supposed to mean?" He hesitated. "I didn't want to freak you out, but I've been hearing things. Voices, just at the edge of hearing, like whispers." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. "I've heard them too. I thought it was just the wind." "There is no wind," he echoed my words from the night before. Bailey suddenly stood, facing the darkness beyond our camp. A low growl rumbled in her throat. We both fell silent, straining to hear what had alerted her. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, the sound of twigs snapping under deliberate footsteps. Moving around the perimeter of our camp, just like the night before. Tristan grabbed the flashlight, pointing it toward the sounds. The beam penetrated only a few yards before the fog swallowed it. "Who's there?" he called, his voice steady despite everything. The footsteps stopped, then from a different direction entirely. "Help me." The voice was thin. It was childlike, with something profoundly wrong about it, as if someone was inexpertly mimicking a human voice. Bailey's growl deepened. Help. Me. I'm loosed. The voice came again, now from yet another direction. I clutched Tristan's arm. Don't answer it, I whispered, though I wasn't sure why, but Tristan was already standing. Hello? Where are you? Do you need help? Yes. The voice was closer now. I'm cold. Scared. The fog swirled at the edge of our campsite, condensing, taking shape. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed a small figure, a child perhaps, but something was wrong with the proportions. The limbs too long, the head slightly too large. Bailey lunged forward, barking ferociously. The figure retreated into the fog. Bailey, no! I grabbed her collar before she could chase after it. That didn't sound like a kid, Tristan said, his voice shaking slightly. No, it didn't. We stayed awake that night, backs to the dying fire, watching the darkness. The voice didn't return, but several times we heard movement in the forest around us, branches snapping, leaves rustling, and once a sound like nails scraping against bark. Dawn brought no relief. The fog was thicker than ever. The forest around us transformed into a gray void. We packed quickly, eager to leave this place behind. We need a plan, I said as we shouldered our packs. We can't just wander aimlessly. Tristan nodded, thinking. The ridge. If we can find it again, maybe the fog will have lifted enough to see something. A road, a town, anything. It seemed like our best option. We set off in what we hoped was the direction of the ridge, Bailey leading the way, still uncharacteristically subdued. The forest felt different in daylight, yet no less menacing. The trees seemed to press closer, their branches reaching like gnarled fingers. More than once, I could swear I saw movement just at the periphery of my vision, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. After what felt like hours of walking, we stumbled upon a narrow, overgrown path, the first sign of human presence we'd seen since Bailey's strange captivity. "A trail!" Tristan exclaimed. "This has to lead somewhere." Hope blossomed in my chest as we followed the path. It wound through the trees, sometimes nearly disappearing beneath undergrowth, but always re-emerging. Bailey seemed more animated now, trotting ahead as if she sensed our destination. The path led us to an old stone wall, crumbling in places but unmistakably man-made. Beyond it stood a small, weathered cabin, its wood gray with age, small windows dark and empty. "Hello," Tristan called as we approached. No answer. The cabin appeared long abandoned. The door hung slightly ajar, creaking in a breeze I couldn't feel. Bailey refused to go near it, planting herself firmly several yards away. "Should we check inside?" I asked, not entirely sure I wanted to. Tristan hesitated, then nodded. "Might find something useful. A map, supplies." We approached cautiously. The door pushed open with a groan of rusted hinges. The interior was a single room, dusty and dim. A cast-iron stove occupied one corner, a small table and chair in another. A narrow bed with a moth-eaten blanket stood against the far wall. "Looks like nobody's been here in years," Tristan remarked, examining a shelf of dusty canned goods. I moved to the table, where a leather-bound book lay open. A journal, perhaps. The pages were yellowed, covered in cramped, faded handwriting. I leaned closer to read. "They're in the trees, always watching. The people of the pines, that's what the old-timers called them. I thought it was just stories." The entry trailed off into illegible scribbles. "Tristan," I called, "look at this." He joined me, reading over my shoulder. "Looks like the ramblings of some hermit." I flipped to another page, dated October 17th, 1978. The fog came again today, thicker than before. When the fog comes, time slips. Hours pass like minutes, or minutes like days, and they come with it. I hear their voices calling, mimicking. They've taken my dog. Poor old Rex. Found him tied to the great pine. Wrong, somehow. not Rex anymore. My blood ran cold. I looked at Tristan, whose face had paled. "Coincidence," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. I turned more pages. The entries became increasingly erratic, the handwriting deteriorating. They want me to join them, become one of them. The people of the pines, ancient, hungry, patient. The forest is theirs, always has been. We're just visitors, unless we stay too long. The final entry, dated simply October, read, "Can't leave, tried. Forest brings me back. Always back to the great pine. Their home, their heart. Maybe if I give them what they want." The rest of the page was blank. I closed the book with trembling hands. "We need to leave. Now." Tristan nodded, no argument this time. We hurried out of the cabin, back to where Bailey waited anxiously. "Do you think—" I began, not sure how to articulate the question. "I think someone lived here and went crazy from isolation," Tristan said firmly. "We should keep following this path. It must lead somewhere." The path continued beyond the cabin, better maintained now. We followed it at a brisk pace, Bailey trotting ahead. My mind kept returning to the journal entries. The great pine, the people of the pines, the fog that warped time. After about 20 minutes, the path opened into a larger clearing. At its center stood a familiar sight, the massive ancient pine tree where we'd found Bailey tied up. "This isn't possible," Tristan breathed. "We've been walking away from this place." Yet there it was, unmistakable. The great pine, as the journal had called it. Bailey began to growl, backing away from the tree. I grabbed her collar to keep her close. "Let's go back," I suggested, trying to keep the rising panic from my voice. "Try another direction." We turned to leave only to find the path had vanished. Where it had been was now just unbroken forest and swirling fog. "This can't be happening," Tristan muttered, running his hands through his hair. "This isn't possible." A whisper floated through the air, too faint to make out words, but unmistakably there. Then another, from a different direction, and another. Soon the clearing was filled with them, overlapping, surrounding us. Bailey barked frantically, spinning in circles, trying to face every direction at once. "Run!" I shouted, picking a random direction and pulling Bailey with me. We crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us with every step. I could hear Tristan right behind me, his breathing heavy. The whispers followed, growing louder, more insistent. They seemed to be saying something now, a single word repeated over and over. "Stay, stay, stay." I don't know how long we ran. Time had lost all meaning in this place. Eventually, exhaustion forced us to stop. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. As we caught our breath, I realized with horror that the clearing with the great pine was just ahead of us. Somehow, we'd run in a complete circle. "No," I moaned. "This isn't happening." Tristan looked just as defeated. "We can't outrun it. Whatever this place is, it doesn't want us to leave." As the reality of our situation sank in, the fog began to lift slightly. Not entirely, but enough to see more of the clearing, and what surrounded it. Carved into the trees encircling the great pine were faces. Hundreds of them, crude but unmistakable. Human faces in various expressions of agony, their mouths open in silent screams. Some looked fresh, the wood still pale where it had been cut. Others were ancient, nearly grown over by bark and lichen. "Oh, God," I whispered. Movement caught Bailey's attention. She turned, hackles raised toward the great pine. A figure stood beside it now, a man, thin and stooped, dressed in tattered clothes. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken. He looked solid enough, but something about him seemed wrong. Too still, too pale. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice dry as dead leaves. "This is their place." "Who are you?" Tristan demanded. "What is this place?" "Name's Morris Thatcher. Was, anyway. Been here. Long time now." He gestured vaguely at the carved faces. "We all have." "The people of the pines," I said, remembering the journal. "That was your cabin we found." He nodded slowly. "Built it, trying to have a normal life. Stupid. Can't have normal here." His gaze drifted to the great pine. "They don't allow it." "Who are they?" Tristan asked. Morris's eyes returned to us, something like pity in them. "Ancient things. Older than people. When settlers came, they took their forest. Cut down trees, built towns, but not here. Here, they remained. Protected this place. Their place." "What do they want?" I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. "Company." Morris smiled, revealing blackened teeth. "Gets lonely, living forever. They take travelers, make them part of the forest. Part of them." He gestured at the carved faces again. "We stay. We watch. We bring others." Bailey growled at Morris, who didn't seem bothered by it. "Your dog knows," he said. "Animals always know. They tried to take her first, make her lead you to the great pine. When that didn't work, they used me." He looked almost apologetic. "I have to do what they want. We all do." "We're leaving," Tristan declared, grabbing my hand. "Come on, Eliza." Morris shook his head. "Told you, can't leave. Forest brings you back. Always back to the great pine." As if summoned by his words, the whispers began again, louder now. The fog thickened around the edges of the clearing, cutting off any escape route. "Please," I begged, "there must be a way out." For a moment, something like resistance flashed in Morris's dead eyes. "There is one way. They always take at least one. Satisfy them, others might go free." "What do you mean, take?" Tristan asked, his voice tight. Morris pointed to the great pine. "Become part of it, part of them. Stay forever." "No," I said firmly. "We're not sacrificing anyone. There has to be another way." The whispers grew more agitated. The fog began to take shapes, vaguely humanoid figures moving just at the edge of visibility. Morris backed away toward the great pine. "Won't be your choice," he said. "They decide. They always decide." The figures in the fog drew closer, more distinct now. They were tall, unnaturally thin, with limbs that bent at odd angles. Their faces were smooth expanses of bark, with only crude indentations suggesting eyes and mouths. Bailey went wild, barking and snarling. Tristan pulled me closer, both of us backing away until we bumped against a tree. The carved face behind me seemed to move in the corner of my eye, its wooden mouth working silently. "Run," Morris said suddenly, his voice different, more human, more urgent. "When I tell you, north. Follow dog, they hate dogs, pure, can find way out." Before I could process what he meant, Morris let out a horrible scream and ran toward the nearest fog figure, crashing into it. "Now!" Tristan grabbed my hand and we ran, Bailey leading the way. Behind us, Morris's screams turned to gurgles, then silence. We crashed through the forest following Bailey, who seemed suddenly purposeful in her movements. The whispers pursued us, angry now, no longer words but hisses and shrieks. Trees reached for us with branch fingers, roots rose to trip us, but Bailey found a path through. North, always north, a direction that had been impossible to maintain before. How long we ran, I don't know. Time had no meaning in this place. But eventually, the forest began to thin. The fog dissipated. The whispers faded. And suddenly, we were stumbling onto a paved road, Bailey already standing on the asphalt, waiting for us. A sign nearby read, "Devil's Hop Yard State Park, 2 miles." We collapsed, gasping for breath, hardly daring to believe we'd escaped. Bailey came to lick my face, her demeanor almost back to normal. "We made it," Tristan breathed. "I can't believe we made it." I nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened. Do you think Morris is... I don't know, but he saved us." We sat in silence for a moment, letting reality settle back around us. Cars occasionally passed, normal people going about their normal lives, completely unaware of what lurked in the heart of Shinipsit State Forest. Eventually, we picked ourselves up and started walking toward Devil's Hop Yard. We'd report our experience, I supposed, though I doubted anyone would believe us. They'd search for Morris Thatcher and find nothing but an abandoned cabin, if even that. As we walked, I realized something was indeed different about Bailey. She stayed close to me, as always, but her eyes were changed. There was a depth to them that hadn't been there before, an awareness that seemed almost human, and sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, I could swear she was smiling. I never went camping again. Tristan and I broke up a month later. Neither of us could look at the other without remembering. The authorities searched for Morris Thatcher but found nothing in the coordinates we gave them. The cabin didn't exist. The great pine didn't exist. But sometimes when the fog rolls in heavy and the wind falls silent, I hear them. Whispers just at the edge of hearing. They're patient, they're ancient. They're still there. The people of the pines, waiting for unwary travelers. And sometimes I catch Bailey staring out the window into the fog, listening to something I can't hear. And I wonder what really followed us out of that forest. My name is Rebecca Clark. I'm 32 years old. This happened in October of 2023. The forest was too quiet. That was the first thing I noticed as we made our way deeper into the Mohawk State Forest in northwestern Connecticut. No birds calling. No squirrels rustling through the underbrush. Just the sound of our footsteps on the path and the occasional whisper of wind through the branches above. "Hey, slow down a bit," called Mia from behind me. "Not all of us have your freakishly long legs, Becca." I turned and waited for my best friend to catch up. Her face was flushed from exertion, dark curls sticking to her forehead. Beside her, Jasper, her golden retriever, trotted happily, tongue lolling. "Sorry," I said, adjusting my backpack. "I just want to reach the campsite before dark." "We've got plenty of time," said Mia, checking her watch. "It's only 2 in the afternoon." I nodded, but something made me glance up at the sky. The sun had already begun its descent, and strange wispy clouds were gathering overhead. They seemed to be moving too fast. "Let's keep going," I said. "I don't like the look of those clouds." Mia and I had been planning this hiking trip for months. Both of us needed to get away from our demanding jobs in New Haven. She as a nurse at Yale New Haven Hospital, me as an environmental lawyer. A weekend of fresh air and solitude in the Connecticut wilderness was exactly what the doctor ordered. We'd chosen the Mohawk State Forest because of its reputation for beautiful vistas and relative isolation. October meant fewer hikers and campers, and the fall foliage would be at its peak. Perfect conditions for a peaceful retreat, or so we thought. The path narrowed as we continued our hike. The trees grew denser, their branches interlocking overhead to form a canopy that blocked out much of the late afternoon light. I checked my watch, 4:30 p.m. We should have reached our designated campsite by now. "Are you sure we're on the right trail?" Mia asked, her voice laced with concern. I pulled out my phone to check the map I'd downloaded. No signal, but the GPS should still work. "That's weird," I muttered, staring at the screen. According to the map, we were nowhere near the marked trails. In fact, according to the GPS, we were in the middle of a lake. "What is it?" Mia asked, peering over my shoulder. "GPS is glitching," I said, trying to hide my unease. "Let me check the paper map." I pulled out the trail map I'd printed as a backup, but as I unfolded it, a chill ran through me. The markings on the map seemed to shift before my eyes. Trails that had been clearly marked now appeared to veer off in different directions, and landmarks I didn't recognize had appeared. "This can't be right," I whispered. "What's wrong?" Mia's voice had an edge to it now. Before I could answer, Jasper let out a low growl. The hair on his back was standing on end, and he was staring intently into the dense underbrush to our left. "Jasper, what is it, boy?" Mia asked, placing a hand on his head. The dog continued to growl, baring his teeth at something we couldn't see. "Probably just a squirrel," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Let's keep moving. We need to find a place to set up camp before it gets dark." We pressed on, following what seemed to be the most well-trodden path. The light was fading quickly now, and the temperature had dropped noticeably. I zipped up my jacket and pulled my beanie lower over my ears. "Becca," Mia said quietly, "I think someone's following us." I turned to look at her, alarmed. "Why do you say that?" "I keep hearing footsteps. When we walk, they walk. When we stop, they stop." I strained my ears but heard nothing beyond our own breathing and the wind. "It's probably just an echo," I suggested, but even I didn't believe that. Jasper had been unusually quiet for the past 10 minutes, walking close to Mia's leg, his tail tucked between his legs. Now he stopped abruptly and let out another low growl, this time directed behind us. "Let's pick up the pace," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. We walked faster, no longer concerned with finding our designated campsite. Any clearing would do at this point. We just needed to set up our tent and build a fire before complete darkness fell. After another 20 minutes of increasingly anxious hiking, we finally stumbled upon a small clearing. It wasn't ideal. The ground was uneven, and the trees around it seemed to lean inward, almost as if they were watching us. But it would have to do. "Here's good," I declared, shrugging off my backpack. "Let's get the tent up." We worked quickly, talking little. The silence of the forest pressed in around us, broken only by the sounds of our labor and Jasper's occasional whimpers. The dog refused to stray more than a few feet from Mia, his eyes constantly scanning the darkening woods. With the tent erected, we turned our attention to building a fire. I'd brought waterproof matches and fire starter, and there was plenty of dead wood scattered around the clearing. But every time we got a flame going, it sputtered and died, as if someone were blowing it out. "What the hell?" I muttered after the 5th attempt. "This doesn't make any sense." "Maybe the wood's too damp," Mia suggested, but we both knew that wasn't the case. The wood was dry, the kindling perfect. On the 6th try, the fire finally caught, but instead of the warm orange glow we expected, the flames burned with a pale, bluish tint. "Is that normal?" Mia whispered, her face illuminated by the eerie light. "It's just the type of wood," I lied. I had no idea why the fire was burning blue, but I didn't want to add to Mia's growing anxiety. We sat close to the fire, eating energy bars and beef jerky in silence. The darkness around us was complete now, the kind of absolute blackness that only exists deep in the wilderness, far from the light pollution of civilization. "Did you hear about what happened here a few years ago?" Mia asked suddenly, her voice unnaturally loud in the quiet. "No. What?" "A group of hikers went missing. 3 friends from New York City. They were experienced hikers, had all the right equipment. They came here for a weekend trip, just like us. They were never found." "How do you know about that?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I read about it when I was researching places for us to go. It happened in this part of the forest. They found their campsite, everything still set up. Food, half eaten, but no sign of the hikers themselves." "Jesus, Mia, why didn't you tell me this before?" She shrugged. "I didn't want to spook you, and it was a long time ago. 5 years at least." I stared into the blue flames, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread that had been building since we entered the forest. "Well, now you've thoroughly creeped me out. Thanks for that." "Sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "I just thought you should know." "Know what? That people disappeared here once? People disappear in the wilderness all the time, Mia. They get lost, they fall, they have medical emergencies. These people didn't just disappear. Becca, they vanished. No trace. And there were stories." "What kind of stories?" I asked, despite myself. "Local legends, about something that lives in these woods. The natives called it the Wendigo." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, come on. Don't tell me you believe in that supernatural crap." "I'm just telling you what I read," Mia said defensively. The Mohegan tribe believed that the Wendigo was once human, but became possessed by a hunger so great that it transformed into a monster. It's said to mimic human voices, to lure people deeper into the woods. "Well, I haven't heard any mysterious voices calling my name, so I think we're safe," I said with forced lightness. Just then, Jasper's head shot up, his ears perked. He let out a soft whine and looked toward the edge of the clearing. "What is it, boy?" Mia asked, following his gaze. I squinted into the darkness but could see nothing beyond the circle of firelight. "Probably just a nocturnal animal," I said. "A raccoon or something." But Jasper continued to stare, his body tense, and then, from somewhere in the darkness beyond our campsite, came a sound that made my blood run cold, the clear, unmistakable sound of someone, or something, whispering my name. "Rebecca." I froze, my energy bar halfway to my mouth. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Mia. Her face had gone pale. "Hear what?" "Someone said my name." Mia's eyes widened. "I didn't hear anything." "Rebecca, come to me." The voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was something wrong about it, as if it were coming from a throat not meant for human speech. Jasper was on his feet now, growling deep in his chest. The hair along his spine was raised, and he was facing the exact direction from which the voice had come. "You must hear it now," I said, my own voice shaking. Mia shook her head slowly. "I don't hear anything, Becca. Just the wind." "It's not the wind. Someone's out there, calling my name." "Rebecca, I'm waiting." The voice was clearer now, more insistent, and it was moving, circling around the edge of the clearing just beyond the reach of our firelight. I got to my feet, scanning the darkness desperately. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. "This isn't funny." "Becca, you're scaring me," Mia said, standing up beside me. "There's no one there." "How can you not hear it?" I demanded, turning to her. "It's saying my name." "Rebecca, join me in the trees." "There." I pointed toward where the voice had come from. "It's over there." Mia followed my finger but shook her head. "I don't see anything, Becca. I think you're imagining things." "I'm not imagining it," I shouted, frustration and fear making my voice crack. "There's someone out there." Jasper barked suddenly, lunging toward the edge of the clearing. Mia grabbed his collar just in time. "Jasper, no," she cried, struggling to hold on to the agitated dog. And then, from directly behind us, came a low, rumbling laugh. It was a sound no human throat could make, a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. We whirled around, and I let out a scream. Standing just at the edge of our campsite was a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs elongated and spindly. Its skin was a sickly grayish-white, stretched taut over a skeletal frame. But it was the face that made my heart skip a beat. Hollow eye sockets, sunken cheeks, and a mouth that stretched too wide across its gaunt face, filled with needle-like teeth. "Oh my God," Mia whispered, finally seeing what I saw. "What is that thing?" The creature tilted its head, regarding us with those empty eye sockets. And then it spoke, its voice now a harsh rasp. "Hungry," it croaked. "So hungry." "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Mia's arm. "Run!" We bolted, leaving everything behind except the small day packs we had kept close. Jasper ran ahead of us, barking frantically. Behind us, I could hear the creature moving through the undergrowth, its movements too fast, too fluid for something of its size. We crashed through the forest blindly, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us at every step. I had no idea which direction we were heading. All that mattered was putting distance between us and that thing. "What was that?" Mia gasped as we ran. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I panted. "Just keep running." We stumbled into another clearing smaller than the first and paused to catch our breath. Jasper was whimpering, pressing himself against Mia's legs. "I think we lost it," I whispered, glancing back the way we had come. "What was that thing, Becca?" Mia's voice was trembling. Was that what you were talking about? The Wendigo? I don't know, I repeated, but we need to keep moving. We need to find our way back to the trail, back to the car. How? We don't even know where we are. Our maps are screwed up, remember? I pulled out my phone, but as expected, there was still no signal. The GPS was still showing us in the middle of a lake. We'll head downhill, I decided. If we keep going downhill, we should eventually hit a road or a stream. We can follow that out. Mia nodded, too frightened to argue. We set off again, moving more cautiously now, trying to make as little noise as possible. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves made us freeze, expecting to see that gaunt figure emerging from the shadows. After what felt like hours of walking, though my watch insisted it had only been 40 minutes, we found ourselves at the edge of another clearing. But this one wasn't empty. In the center stood a small cabin, its windows dark, a thin wisp of smoke rising from its chimney. People, Mia whispered, hope lighting up her face. Thank God. Wait, I caught her arm as she started toward the cabin. Something doesn't feel right. The cabin looked old, its log walls weathered and dark with age. There was no vehicle parked outside, no sign of modern amenities. Who would be living out here, so deep in the forest? We need help, Becca, Mia insisted. Whoever lives there might know the way out. They might have a phone or a radio. I hesitated, every instinct telling me to stay away from that cabin. But Mia was right. We needed help, and what choice did we have? We couldn't spend the night in the forest, not with that thing hunting us. Okay, I said finally, but be careful. We approached the cabin slowly, Jasper staying close to Mia's side. As we drew nearer, I noticed details that had been obscured by distance. The roof was partially collapsed on one side, many of the windows were broken, and the smoke rising from the chimney was not the white or gray of a normal fire, but a strange, greenish color. I don't think anyone lives here, I whispered. Look at the state of it. Then who lit the fire? Mia asked. Mia. We reached the front door, which hung slightly ajar. The wood was rotting, the hinges rusted. Hello? I called out, knocking on the door frame. Is anyone there? We're lost hikers and we need help. No response. Try again, Mia urged. Hello? I called louder. Please, if anyone's there, we need help. Still nothing. I pushed the door open wider, wincing at the loud creak of the hinges. We're coming in, I announced. We mean no harm. The interior of the cabin was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of dying embers in the hearth. The greenish smoke hung in the air, acrid and strange-smelling. The cabin consisted of a single room, sparsely furnished with a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed pushed against the far wall. Hello, I called again, stepping inside. Mia followed, clutching Jasper's collar. The dog was growling softly, his eyes fixed on the bed. There's no one here, Mia said, looking around. But someone was. Look, the fire's still going. I moved toward the hearth, hoping to find something we could use. Matches, a lantern, anything. But as I drew closer to the fire, I realized that what was burning wasn't wood at all. They were bones. Human bones. I stumbled backward, a scream caught in my throat. What is it? Mia asked, alarmed by my reaction. We need to go, I managed to say. Now. Why? What? Her question was cut off by a soft thud from outside the cabin. Then another. Footsteps, heavy footsteps approaching the door. Mia's eyes widened in terror. It found us, she whispered. I looked around frantically for an escape route. There was a small window at the back of the cabin, just big enough for us to squeeze through. The window, I hissed, pointing. Go. Mia didn't hesitate. She rushed to the window, pushing Jasper through first, then climbing out herself. I was right behind her, casting one last glance over my shoulder at the door. It was opening, slowly, the creaking of the hinges loud in the silence. And through the widening gap I could see a skeletal hand, its fingers too long, the skin stretched too tight over the bones. I dove through the window just as the door swung fully open. We found ourselves behind the cabin, facing another stretch of dense forest. "Which way?" Mia asked, panic making her voice high and breathless. "Just go." I pointed away from the cabin. "Run!" We took off again, crashing through the underbrush. Jasper led the way, his golden fur a beacon in the darkness. Behind us, I heard the cabin door slam shut, followed by the sound of breaking glass. The creature was coming through the window after us. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs threatened to give way beneath us. Finally, we collapsed behind a fallen tree, trying desperately to muffle the sound of our labored breathing. "Do you think we lost it?" Mia whispered after a moment. I peered over the log, scanning the forest behind us. Nothing moved in the darkness. "I think so," I whispered back. "For now, at least." "What was that thing, Becca? And that cabin? Those bones?" "I don't know," I said again, wishing I had a better answer. "But I think you might have been right about the Wendigo." Mia shuddered. "How do we kill it?" "Kill it? Are you insane? We need to get out of here, not fight that thing." "But what if we can't get out? What if it keeps hunting us, leading us in circles?" I hadn't considered that possibility, but now that Mia mentioned it, I realized she might be right. Our maps were useless, our GPS defunct. What if the creature was somehow responsible for that? What if it was manipulating our perception, ensuring we remained lost in its hunting ground? "I don't know how to kill a Wendigo," I admitted. "The legends say they're nearly immortal." "Nearly?" Mia seized on the word. "That means there's a way." I racked my brain, trying to remember anything I'd ever read or heard about Wendigo lore. "Fire," I said finally. "I think fire is supposed to be effective. And maybe silver." "We don't have any silver," Mia pointed out, "but we have matches." "They're back at the campsite," I reminded her, "along with everything else. Then we need to go back. Are you crazy? That thing could be waiting for us there. Or it could be searching for us in the opposite direction," Mia argued. "We need those supplies, Becca. Without them, we're as good as dead out here, Wendigo or no Wendigo." She had a point. Without our tent, our food, our equipment, we wouldn't survive long in the wilderness, especially with the temperature continuing to drop. "Okay," I conceded, "but we need to be careful. Really careful." We rested for a few more minutes, then set off in what we hoped was the direction of our abandoned campsite. It was difficult to navigate in the darkness, but we tried to retrace our steps as best we could, using the stars when they were visible through breaks in the canopy. After what felt like an eternity of cautious walking, always alert for any sign of the creature, we spotted a faint glow through the trees ahead. "The fire," Mia whispered. "It's still burning." We approached slowly, using the cover of the trees. To our surprise, our campsite appeared undisturbed. The tent still stood, our backpacks where we'd left them. The fire still burned with that strange blue flame, neither diminishing nor growing in our absence. "I don't like this," I murmured. "It feels like a trap." "Maybe," Mia agreed, "but we need those supplies." We watched the clearing for several long minutes, seeing no sign of movement, hearing nothing unusual. Finally, I made a decision. "I'll go first," I said. "You stay here with Jasper. If anything happens, run. Don't wait for me. Just run." Mia looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded, holding Jasper close. I took a deep breath and stepped out from the cover of the trees, half expecting to be immediately set upon by the gaunt figure. But nothing happened. The clearing remained peaceful, quiet except for the soft crackling of the fire. I moved quickly to my backpack, keeping my head on a swivel, watching for any sign of the creature. I reached the pack and began rummaging through it, searching for anything that might serve as a weapon or defense against the Wendigo. "Hurry," Mia hissed from the edge of the clearing. "I'm trying," I whispered back, pulling out my heavy flashlight, a potential makeshift club, and the box of waterproof matches. I continued searching and found my small camping hatchet. Not much against a supernatural creature, but better than nothing. I was just about to call Mia over when a blood-curdling scream cut through the night. It was Mia, and the sound came from the woods where I'd left her, not from the edge of the clearing where I could still see her standing. Mia! I looked back and forth between the Mia at the edge of the clearing and the direction of the scream. The Mia I could see smiled, and there was something wrong about that smile. It was too wide, showing too many teeth. "What's wrong, Becca?" she asked, but her voice was off, hollow somehow. "Aren't you going to help me?" Horror washed over me as I realized what I was seeing. It wasn't Mia standing at the edge of the clearing. It was the Wendigo, mimicking her appearance. "Where is she?" I demanded, gripping the hatchet tightly. "What have you done with Mia?" The thing wearing Mia's face tilted its head, the smile widening impossibly further. "Why don't you come and see?" it suggested, its voice still a poor imitation of Mia's. Another scream tore through the night, and this time I could hear desperation in it. "Becca, help me!" I didn't wait to see what the creature would do next. I sprinted in the direction of the screams, hatchet in one hand, flashlight in the other. Behind me, I heard that terrible rumbling laugh again, and the sound of pursuit. I crashed through the underbrush following the sound of Mia's voice. She was still screaming, calling my name. Jasper was barking frantically. I burst into another small clearing and skidded to a halt at the sight before me. Mia was suspended several feet off the ground, held aloft by thick vines that had wrapped around her arms and legs. Jasper was leaping and snapping at the vines, trying desperately to help her. "Becca!" Mia cried when she saw me, relief flooding her face. "Help me! These things just grabbed me!" I rushed forward, raising the hatchet to hack at the vines. But as I drew closer, I noticed something strange. The vines weren't attached to any trees or plants. They seemed to be growing directly out of the ground. "Mia, hold still," I called, approaching cautiously. "I'm going to cut you down." I swung the hatchet at the nearest vine, and to my horror it recoiled like a living thing, writhing away from the blade. A high-pitched keening filled the air as if the vine itself were screaming. The ground beneath my feet began to tremble. More vines burst from the earth, whipping through the air toward me. I slashed wildly with the hatchet, barely managing to keep them at bay. "What's happening?" Mia cried, struggling against her bonds. "I don't know," I called back, ducking under a vine that tried to wrap around my neck. "It's like they're alive." Jasper was going berserk, snapping and snarling at the animate plants. One of the vines caught him around the middle, lifting him into the air. The dog yelped in pain and fear. "Jasper!" Mia screamed, struggling harder. I managed to fight my way to where Jasper was suspended and swung the hatchet with all my might, severing the vine. The dog fell to the ground with a thud but immediately scrambled to his feet, shaking himself. "Run, Jasper," I commanded, pointing toward the edge of the clearing. "Go!" But the loyal dog refused to leave, standing his ground beside me as I continued to battle the writhing vines. I was making progress toward Mia when a new sound stopped me in my tracks. That same deep, rumbling laugh from before. I turned to see the creature stepping into the clearing. It had abandoned Mia's form and once again appeared as the gaunt, skeletal figure we'd first encountered. "You cannot save her," it rasped, those empty eye sockets fixed on me. "She is already mine." "Let her go," I demanded, brandishing the hatchet. The creature tilted its head. "Why would I do that? I've been hunting you both since you entered my forest, and now I have you exactly where I want you." "Your forest?" I repeated. "This is state land. People come here all the time." "Yes," the creature agreed, taking a step closer. "They do, and those who stray from the path, those who venture too deep, they become mine." "Like the hikers who disappeared 5 years ago?" I asked, trying to keep it talking while I inched closer to Mia. "They were delicious," the creature confirmed, running a long tongue over those needle-like teeth. "Just as you will be." "I don't think so," I said, reaching into my pocket for the box of matches. The creature's laugh was like stones grinding together. "Fire? You think fire will save you?" "It's worth a try," I said. striking a match. To my surprise and relief, the flame caught, burning bright and orange, not the eerie blue of our campfire. I held it toward the nearest vine, which recoiled immediately. "That will not be enough," the creature said, but there was a note of uncertainty in its voice now. "Maybe not," I agreed, "but this might be." I pulled a small bottle from my pocket, lighter fluid, which I'd grabbed along with the matches. Before the creature could react, I doused the nearest vines and touched the match to them. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The vines writhed and thrashed as the flames spread rapidly, that high-pitched keening turning to agonized shrieks. The creature itself let out a howl of pain, doubling over as if it were feeling the fire itself. "They're connected to you," I realized aloud. "These vines, they're part of you." "Clever girl," the creature hissed through what sounded like gritted teeth, but not clever enough. It straightened, and with a gesture of its skeletal hand, the burning vines were severed from the rest, falling to the ground where they continued to smolder. New vines burst from the earth, these moving with even greater speed and purpose. I barely had time to duck as one whipped past my head. Another caught me around the ankle, yanking me off my feet. I hit the ground hard, the air knocked from my lungs. "Becca!" Mia screamed. I slashed at the vine with the hatchet, severing it, but two more immediately took its place, wrapping around my legs, dragging me across the clearing toward the waiting creature. "Now you are mine," it said, those needle teeth gleaming in the light of the still burning vines. I struggled frantically, but the vines were too strong, too numerous. Jasper was barking madly, trying to help, but unable to do more than nip at the writhing plants. As I was pulled closer to the creature, I noticed something glinting at its throat, a pendant of some kind, hanging from a cord around its neck. The metal caught the light of the flames, and I realized it was silver. An old coin, perhaps, with a hole punched through it? A desperate plan formed in my mind. I stopped struggling against the vines and instead let them drag me closer to the creature. It bent down, reaching for me with those impossibly long fingers. "You have fought well," it said almost respectfully, "but now it is over." "Not quite," I replied. With every ounce of strength I had left, I lunged upward, swinging the hatchet not at the creature itself, but at the silver pendant hanging from its neck. The blade connected, severing the cord. The pendant fell to the ground with a soft thud. The effect was instantaneous and shocking. The creature let out a howl that seemed to shake the very trees around us. It staggered backward, clutching at its throat where the pendant had been. "No!" it shrieked. "Not my anchor! Not my tie to this world!" The vines holding Mia suddenly went slack, dropping her unceremoniously to the ground. The ones wrapped around my legs did the same. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the silver pendant from where it had fallen. The creature was changing before our eyes, its form becoming less solid, more like smoke or mist. It reached for me, those skeletal fingers passing through my arm like a ghost. "Give it back," it pleaded, its voice weaker now. "Please, I cannot exist in this realm without it." "Good," I said firmly, backing away. "Go back to wherever you came from. Leave these woods. Leave us alone." "I cannot," it said, its form continuing to dissipate. "This forest is my hunting ground, my home. I am bound to it, as the charm is bound to me." An idea struck me. "If I destroy this," I held up the pendant, "what happens to you?" The creature's reaction told me everything I needed to know. It lunged for me with renewed desperation, but its insubstantial form passed through me once again. "Please," it begged. "I have existed here for centuries. This is my place." "Not anymore," I said, placing the pendant on a flat rock. I raised the hatchet high and brought it down with all my strength. The silver shattered with a sound like a thunderclap. A blinding light erupted from the fragments, forcing me to shield my eyes. The creature's scream was like nothing I had ever heard before, a sound of such anguish and rage that it seemed to pierce straight through to my soul. When I could see again, The creature was gone. The vines had withered to dust. The forest was silent once more, but it was a different kind of silence now, peaceful rather than ominous. Mia limped over to me, Jasper at her side. She was pale and shaking, but alive. "Is it over?" she asked softly. "I think so," I said, staring at the shattered remains of the pendant. "I think it's gone." "What was that thing? Really?" I shook my head. "I don't know if it was a Wendigo or something else entirely, some ancient spirit or entity bound to these woods." I looked around at the now ordinary forest. "But whatever it was, I don't think it's coming back." We made our way back to our campsite, which was exactly as we'd left it, tent still standing, fire now burning with a normal orange flame. We collapsed beside it, too exhausted to do anything but sit and stare into the flames. "We should leave first thing in the morning," Mia said after a while. "Agreed," I nodded, "as soon as it's light." We spent an uneasy night, taking turns to keep watch. But nothing disturbed us. No voices called from the darkness. No gaunt figure appeared at the edge of our camp. At dawn, we packed up quickly and began the hike back. To our surprise, the trail was exactly where it should be, clearly marked and easy to follow. Our maps made sense again, and my phone's GPS showed our exact location in Mohawk State Forest, not in the middle of some non-existent lake. The hike back was uneventful, almost suspiciously so. The birds were singing, squirrels darted across our path, and sunlight filtered through the canopy above. It was as if the events of the previous night had been nothing but a nightmare, but the cuts and bruises on our bodies told a different story. And Jasper's wary posture, his ears constantly alert, his eyes scanning the forest as we walked, confirmed that what we had experienced had been all too real. "Do you think we should tell anyone?" Mia asked as we reached the parking lot where my car was still parked, untouched. I considered the question as I loaded our gear into the trunk. "Who would believe us?" I finally replied. "A Wendigo? Animated vines? A magical silver pendant? They'd think we were crazy or on drugs." Mia nodded, her expression troubled. "But what if it comes back? What if it finds another anchor, another way to manifest? What if other hikers wander in and—" She didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. "We'll report that the trail markers are confusing," I decided. "That we got lost and had a scary night in the woods. We'll suggest they improve the signage, maybe close some areas for maintenance. It's the best we can do without sounding like lunatics." "I guess," Mia agreed reluctantly, helping Jasper into the back seat. We drove away from Mohawk State Forest in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I couldn't help glancing in the rearview mirror repeatedly, half expecting to see a gaunt figure watching us from the tree line. But there was nothing. As the miles passed and the forest receded behind us, I felt myself beginning to relax. We had survived. We had defeated a creature that had possibly been preying on humans for centuries. We had a story that no one would ever believe, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that we were alive. But as we were about to turn onto the highway that would take us back to New Haven, Mia suddenly grabbed my arm. "Becca, stop the car," she said urgently. I pulled over, alarmed by the panic in her voice. "What? What is it?" Mia pointed at her backpack, which was sitting on the seat beside Jasper. Something was moving inside it. Slowly, cautiously, Mia unzipped the main compartment. We both peered inside. Nestled among her clothes and equipment was a small vine, no thicker than a pencil, with a few leaves sprouting from it. As we watched, it twitched slightly, as if sensing our gaze. "Oh my God!" Mia whispered, recoiling. "How did that get in there?" I stared at the vine, remembering how they had writhed and twisted, how they had seemed to have a mind of their own, how they had been connected to the creature. "Get rid of it," I said, my voice shaking. "Throw it out. Now." Mia didn't hesitate. She grabbed the backpack, carried it to the side of the road, and dumped out the contents. The vine fell onto the asphalt, still wiggling feebly. I got out of the car, and together we stomped on it until it was nothing but a green smear on the pavement. Then we hurriedly gathered Mia's belongings, stuffed them back into her pack, and returned to the car. We drove away as fast as the speed limit would allow, neither of us speaking. But I knew we were thinking the same thing. What if that wasn't the only vine? What if there were more, hidden in our gear? What if we had brought a piece of that thing out of the forest with us? And, the most terrifying thought of all, what if it could grow again, regenerate from even the smallest fragment? I pushed the thought away, focusing on the road ahead. We had survived the night. We had destroyed the creature's anchor to our world. We had escaped the Mohawk State Forest. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the back seat of my car, something that had followed us out of those dark woods, something that was waiting patiently for night to fall once more. I never returned to Mohawk State Forest. Neither did Mia. We told the park rangers about getting lost, about the confusing trail markers, but we said nothing about what had really happened that night. As I'd predicted, they thanked us for the feedback and promised to look into it. Life went back to normal, or as normal as it could be after an experience like that. We didn't speak about it much, Mia and I, but sometimes I would catch her staring into the distance, a haunted look in her eyes, and I knew she was remembering. As for me, I couldn't look at houseplants the same way again. Every vine, every tendril, seemed to reach for me when I wasn't looking directly at it. I started avoiding parks and gardens, preferring the concrete and steel of the city to anywhere plants grew in abundance. And sometimes in my dreams, I heard that voice again, calling my name from the darkness. That raspy, inhuman voice, filled with hunger and rage. That voice that promised it would find me again, no matter where I hid. Rebecca, I'm still waiting. A month after our experience, I received a package in the mail. There was no return address, no note inside, just a small silver pendant, identical to the one I had destroyed in the forest. I drove out to the coast that same day and threw it into the ocean as far as I could. I don't know if it will stay there, or if it will somehow find its way back to me. All I know is that I will never set foot in Mohawk State Forest again, and if you're wise, neither will you, because something ancient hunts in those woods, something that knows your name before you speak it, something that can wear your friend's face and call to you with their voice, something that has been feeding on lost hikers for centuries and will continue to do so for centuries more. And if you hear your name whispered on the wind while walking those trails, if the maps suddenly don't make sense and your GPS shows you in the middle of a lake, if your campfire burns with a strange blue flame, run, run, and pray it doesn't follow you home. But most of all, pray that even if you escape, you haven't brought a piece of it back with you. A tiny fragment of ancient hunger hiding in your backpack, waiting for the right moment to begin growing again. Because the Wendigo is patient. It has existed for centuries, and it can wait a little longer to taste your fear, to feast on your flesh. It can wait for you to let your guard down, to think you're safe. And then, when night falls and you're alone in the dark, you'll hear it again. That voice. Your name. I'm still waiting. And this time, you won't escape. Every few years, there are reports of hikers going missing in Mohawk State Forest. Most are found, cold and confused, but ultimately unharmed. They all tell the same story. The trails seemed to shift, their GPS devices malfunctioned. They felt like they were being watched. But some hikers are never found. Their campsites are discovered undisturbed, as if they had simply vanished in the middle of their activities. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle or wild animal attacks, just empty sleeping bags, unzipped from the inside. And if you listen carefully on certain nights, when the moon is hidden and the forest is too quiet, you might hear their voices, calling from deep within the woods, begging for help or beckoning you to join them. But they aren't themselves anymore. They belong to something else now. something ancient and hungry that wears their faces and speaks with their voices but is nothing like them at all, something that waits in the shadows of sleeping giant. When Mia and I told the rangers about the problems with the trail markers, they did send out a team to check. 3 rangers went into the heart of Mohawk State Forest. Only 2 returned. The official report cited an accident, a fall from a cliff edge while checking markers. They never found the body. They said it must have been carried away by wildlife. But I know better. I know what really happened to that ranger. I know what's still out there, hunting in those woods, growing stronger with each victim it claims. And sometimes, on dark nights when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear scratching at my window. Tiny, delicate sounds, like the tip of a vine searching for a way inside. I keep a box of matches and a can of lighter fluid beside my bed now, just in case, because the Wendigo is patient. But so am I. And I'm still waiting, too. The end. My name is Olivia Winters. I'm 34 years old. This happened in May of 2024, though sometimes I still feel like I'm trapped there, in those woods, in those moments when everything I thought I knew about reality shattered like brittle glass. I've been a wildlife photographer for nearly a decade, specializing in capturing the forgotten corners of America's wilderness. My work has been featured in nature magazines and conservation campaigns, but none of my previous expeditions prepared me for what I encountered in the dense forests of Devil's Hopyard State Park in East Haddam, Connecticut. Megan Foster had been my best friend since college. While I was the cautious planner who meticulously researched every trail and packed for every contingency, Megan was pure spontaneity, the type to change plans on a whim because she spotted something interesting just beyond the next ridge. Her bright laugh and endless optimism had pulled me through my divorce 6 months earlier, and this trip was her idea, a way to help me reconnect with myself and my passion for photography after months of emotional numbness. "Come on, Liv," she'd said over the phone. "There's this gorgeous state park in Connecticut with waterfalls and these weird rock formations. Chapman Falls is supposed to be incredible, and there are all these legends about the place. The Devil's Hopyard. Doesn't that just sound like somewhere we need to explore?" I'd been hesitant. May in New England meant unpredictable weather, and I'd heard that parts of Devil's Hopyard were remote enough that cell reception was spotty at best. But Megan had a way of making everything sound like an adventure waiting to happen, and honestly, I needed something, anything, to pull me out of the fog I'd been living in. "We'll book a night at this little B&B I found online," she continued, her voice bubbling with excitement, "run by some local woman. Then we'll head into the wilderness for 5 days. Just us, the trees, and whatever creatures you want to photograph." That's how we found ourselves driving down a narrow tree-lined road that wound deeper into the Connecticut countryside than I'd thought possible. Our GPS had lost a signal 30 minutes earlier, and we were navigating by the hand-drawn map the B&B owner had emailed us. "Are you sure this is right?" I asked, peering through the windshield at the thickening forest. The afternoon light filtered through the canopy in dappled patterns, beautiful but disorienting. "Whispering Pines B&B, just 2 more miles down this road," Megan confirmed, squinting at the map. "Eleanor, that's the owner, said it's the only house out this way." The road narrowed further, branches scraping against the sides of my Subaru. Just as I was about to suggest turning back, the trees opened up to reveal a small clearing. In the center stood a Victorian farmhouse, its white paint grayed with age, surrounded by towering pine trees that swayed and whispered in the breeze. "Told you," Megan said triumphantly, folding the map and shoving it into the glove compartment. As we pulled up to the house, the front door opened. A woman who looked to be in her 60s stepped onto the porch. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wore a floral print dress that seemed from another era, and smiled with such genuine warmth that my initial unease began to fade. "You must be Megan and Olivia," she called as we stepped out of the car. "I'm Eleanor Blackwood. Welcome to Whispering Pines." Eleanor was the perfect hostess, attentive but not intrusive. She showed us to a charming room with twin beds covered in handmade quilts, then served us tea and homemade blueberry scones in her kitchen as she told us about the area. "Devil's Hop Yard has been my home for over 40 years, she said, pouring more tea from an antique silver pot. People come up with all sorts of stories about how it got its name. Some say the devil himself danced among the stone formations and left his footprints. Others claim it's from the hops used in early beer making. What do you think? Megan asked, leaning forward eagerly. Eleanor's eyes, a pale gray that reminded me of morning mist, seemed to focus on something distant. I think places hold memories, she said finally, and some memories are darker than others. Something in her tone made the hair on my arms rise, but Megan just nodded enthusiastically. That's why we're here. Well, that and Liv's photography. She's incredible. Captures things most people miss. Eleanor's gaze shifted to me, assessing. Is that so? You have a gift for seeing what others cannot? I shifted uncomfortably. I just pay attention. Eleanor smiled, but something flickered behind her eyes. Be careful what you pay attention to in these woods, dear. Not everything wants to be seen. That night I dreamt of running through endless trees, pursued by something I couldn't see but could feel breathing down my neck. I woke, gasping, sweat-soaked sheets twisted around me. Across the room, Megan slept peacefully, her face half buried in her pillow. I slipped out of bed and went to the window. The moon was nearly full, casting the pines in silver light. They swayed even though I couldn't feel any breeze, their shadows dancing across the lawn. For just a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the edge of the forest, tall and unnaturally thin. But when I blinked, there was nothing but darkness between the trees. Breakfast was another showcase of Eleanor's cooking skills. Fluffy pancakes with fresh berries and hand-whipped cream. As we ate, she drew us a detailed map of hiking trails, marking spots she thought would be good for photography. There's a spring here, she said, her finger tapping a spot deep in the wilderness. The water is exceptionally clear. And here, her nail, I noticed, was slightly curved and pointed, is an old trapper's cabin, abandoned decades ago but still standing. Very photogenic. Thanks so much, Megan said, carefully folding the map and tucking it into her backpack. This is incredibly helpful. As we packed up the car, Eleanor appeared with a small cloth bag tied with twine. A little something for your journey, she said, pressing it into my hands. Tea made from local herbs. Very soothing after a long day of hiking. The bag felt unusually heavy for its size, and there was an earthy metallic smell that made my nose wrinkle. That's very kind, I said, tucking it into my pack's side pocket. Eleanor caught my wrist, her fingers surprisingly strong. Promise me you'll use it, she said, her voice intense. The forest can be challenging. This will help you both rest. I nodded, unsettled by her grip. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Eleanor stood motionless on her porch, watching us until we disappeared around a bend. Well, she was fascinating, Megan said cheerfully. A bit eccentric, but those scones were to die for. Did she seem odd to you? I asked, still feeling the phantom pressure of her fingers around my wrist. She's probably just lonely out here by herself, Megan shrugged. Besides, all the best people are a little weird, right? We parked at the Chapman Falls trailhead and shouldered our packs. The day was perfect for hiking. Clear skies, mild temperature, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine and earth. The falls themselves were spectacular, water cascading over ancient stone formations that did indeed look like they could have been carved by supernatural feet. I spent an hour photographing the play of light on water while Megan explored the surrounding area. The trouble started as we moved deeper into the park, following Eleanor's map toward our first campsite. What began as a clearly marked trail gradually became more overgrown until we were pushing through undergrowth and climbing over fallen trees. Are you sure this is right? I asked for the third time, pausing to check my compass. It was spinning wildly, the needle refusing to settle on north. Megan frowned, studying the map. According to Eleanor, there should be a stream just ahead, and the campsite is on its bank. I listened but heard no sound of running water. Let me check the GPS again. I pulled out my phone, but the screen showed no signal and the battery had drained from 80% to 15% in the hour since I'd last checked it. That's weird, I muttered. What? My phone's almost dead. Megan pulled hers out and frowned. Mine too, and it's so hot. She held it up, and I could see it was true. Condensation had formed inside the screen. Let's just push on, I suggested, uncomfortably aware that the forest had gone silent around us. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind in the trees. If we don't find the stream in the next 20 minutes, we'll double back to the falls and camp there instead. We pressed forward, and I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Twice I turned quickly, certain I'd catch someone, or something following us, but there was never anything there. The shadows between the trees seemed to deepen despite the afternoon sun, and the air felt heavier with each step. Finally, we heard the welcome sound of water. The stream was where Eleanor had marked it, though it seemed to flow more sluggishly than I would have expected. The campsite, a small clearing beside it, looked as though it hadn't been used in years. The fire pit overgrown with weeds, the log benches around it rotted. "This'll do," Megan said, dropping her pack with a sigh of relief. "Let's set up before we lose the light." As I unpacked my tent, I noticed something odd about the surrounding trees. Many had strange symbols carved into their trunks. Not the usual initials or crude drawings left by hikers, but intricate patterns that seemed to writhe when viewed from the corner of my eye. "Megan," I called, "come look at this." But she'd wandered to the stream and was kneeling beside it, her water bottle forgotten on the ground next to her. "Megan?" She didn't respond, just stared into the water with an intensity that sent alarm bells ringing through my mind. I approached cautiously, noticing how unnaturally still the water was. No ripples, no movement, despite being a flowing stream. "Meg, what are you doing?" She looked up at me, her eyes slightly unfocused. "It's so clear," she said dreamily. "I can see all the way to the bottom. There's something down there, Liv. Something beautiful." Before I could stop her, she plunged her hands into the water and brought them to her lips, drinking deeply. "Jesus, Megan." I grabbed her shoulders, pulling her back. "You know you need to filter that first." She blinked at me, water dripping down her chin. "It's fine," she said, her voice oddly flat. "It's the purest water I've ever tasted." I felt the first real tendril of fear curl through my stomach. "Come on," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Help me set up camp." We worked in silence, the tent going up more awkwardly than usual as Megan seemed distracted, her movements clumsy. By the time we had a small fire going, the sun had set, plunging the forest into darkness far more profound than seemed natural. Our headlamps created small pools of light that the surrounding blackness seemed eager to devour. "I'm going to get more firewood," Megan announced suddenly, standing up. I glanced at the substantial pile we'd already collected. "We have plenty." "We'll need more for the night," she insisted, already moving toward the tree line. "It's going to be cold." "Wait," I started, but she had already disappeared into the darkness without even taking her headlamp. I sat by the fire, increasingly uneasy as minutes stretched into an hour with no sign of Megan. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore and grabbed my flashlight to search for her. "Megan!" I called, moving carefully among the trees. "Meg, where are you?" No answer came, but as I ventured further from camp, I began to hear a soft, rhythmic sound. Not quite singing, not quite chanting, but something in between. I followed it, my flashlight beam cutting weakly through the dense undergrowth, until I reached another small clearing. There, in the center, stood Megan. Her back was to me, her arms raised toward the night sky. Around her feet, the ground seemed to be moving, though I couldn't make out what was causing the shifting patterns in the dirt. "Megan?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. She turned slowly, and in the beam of my flashlight I saw her face. Her eyes completely black, her lips stretched in a smile that was too wide, too full of teeth. "Olivia," she said, but her voice was wrong, layered somehow, as if multiple people were speaking at once. "You should be at camp. It's not time for you yet." I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Megan, what's happening to you?" She tilted her head at an impossible angle. "Megan is here with me. She's showing me such interesting things about you, Olivia. Your fears, your weaknesses, the darkness you try so hard to keep buried." I ran. Branches whipped against my face. Roots seemed to reach up to trip me, but blind panic drove me forward until I burst back into our campsite. I threw myself into the tent, zipping it closed as if thin nylon could protect me from whatever had taken hold of my friend. Hours later, I heard footsteps approaching. The tent zipper slowly opened, and Megan's face appeared. Normal now, concerned. "Liv? What are you doing in here alone? I've been looking everywhere for you." I shrank back against my sleeping bag. "Where have you been?" She frowned. "Getting firewood, like I said, but I got a little turned around in the dark. Why are you looking at me like that?" "I saw you in a clearing," I said, watching her carefully. "You were different." Megan laughed, crawling into the tent. "Different how? You're freaking me out." I wanted desperately to believe that what I'd seen had been a hallucination, a trick of light and shadow and my own anxiety. "Never mind," I said finally. "I'm just tired." That night, I lay awake, listening to Megan's breathing. It wasn't the familiar rhythm I'd heard on countless camping trips before. It was irregular, with occasional pauses so long I'd find myself holding my own breath, waiting. Just before dawn, I must have drifted off, because I jerked awake to find Megan's face inches from mine, her eyes open but empty, that too wide smile back on her lips. "Jesus!" I gasped, scrambling backward. Megan blinked and her expression returned to normal. "What? What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied, my heart racing. "Bad dream." The next day passed in a fog of dread. Megan seemed mostly like herself, but there were moments. A blank stare that lasted too long, a laugh that didn't match the situation, the way she would sometimes stop mid-sentence and tilt her head as if listening to a voice only she could hear. We hiked deeper into the park, following Eleanor's map to the old trapper's cabin she'd mentioned. The structure was even more dilapidated than I'd expected. Half the roof caved in, the door hanging by a single rusted hinge. But something compelled me to explore it, perhaps the photographer in me drawn to its decaying beauty. Inside, dust motes danced in the shafts of light streaming through the damaged roof. Animal droppings and dead leaves littered the floor, but one corner contained an old wooden chest that seemed relatively intact. Curious, I tried the lid. It was unlocked, and inside I found a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed but still legible. "Find anything cool?" Megan called from outside. "Just some old book," I replied, tucking the journal into my pack to examine later. Something told me I shouldn't let Megan see it. That evening, while Megan was washing at a nearby creek, I took out the journal and began to read by firelight. It had belonged to a park ranger named Thomas Carver, with entries dating back to 1978. The early pages contained mundane observations about weather and wildlife, but as I read on, the tone changed. May 15th, 1978. Third disappearance this month. Search teams found nothing. The hiker's car is still in the lot. Packs and supplies at their campsite, but no sign of them. Sheriff thinks they got lost, but this area isn't that big. You don't just vanish here unless something takes you. June 2nd, 1978. Visited the Blackwood place today. Eleanor's been here as long as anyone can remember, though she doesn't look much older than 50. Asked her about the missing hikers. She seemed concerned, made me tea while we talked. Felt strange afterward, dizzy, can't remember driving home. I flipped forward several pages. July 20th, 1978. found symbols carved into trees near Chapman Falls. Not vandalism from visitors. These are old, the bark grown around them. Asked local historian about them. He turned white, refused to discuss it. Said I should leave them alone. Said I should leave her alone. August 3rd, 1978. Dreams getting worse. See Eleanor in them now. She's always standing among the trees, watching. But she's different. Taller, thinner, her fingers too long, too sharp. She calls me by name, tells me she's been waiting for me. I've started avoiding sleep. August 10th, 1978. Found a spring deep in the woods today. Water unnaturally clear. Saw my reflection, but it wasn't me looking back. Filled a sample bottle for testing. By the time I got back to the station, the water had turned black. Left it on my desk overnight. In the morning, the bottle was empty, but no sign of leakage. Just gone. The entries became increasingly frantic, the handwriting deteriorating. September 2nd, 1978. Eleanor isn't human. She's been here much longer than 40 years. Found town records from 1842 mentioning a Eleanor Blackwood who ran a boarding house in the same location. Same description, same woman. What is she? The final entry, dated September 15th, 1978, was barely legible, the page stained with what looked disturbingly like dried blood. She knows I know. Tried to run, no escape. The trees move, the paths change. Everything leads back to her. If anyone finds this, stay away from the spring. Stay away from Eleanor Blackwood. She takes more than just your life. She takes... The entry ended abruptly, a long, jagged line trailing off the page as if the writer's hand had been jerked away. My blood had turned to ice. I closed the journal with trembling hands, the ranger's warning echoing in my mind. The spring. Eleanor had marked it on our map, and Megan had drunk from it. A twig snapped behind me and I whirled around. Megan stood at the edge of our campsite, her wet hair hanging in ropes around her face, her eyes reflecting the firelight like an animal's. "What are you reading?" she asked, her voice too soft. I shoved the journal deep into my pack. Nothing important, just trail notes. She watched me for a long moment, then smiled. A normal smile, thank God. I'm exhausted. Ready for bed? That night I pretended to sleep, gripping my Swiss Army knife under my pillow. Around midnight, I heard Megan rise silently from her sleeping bag. Through slitted eyes, I watched her slip out of the tent. I waited a few minutes, then followed, staying low and moving as quietly as possible. The moon was bright enough to see by, illuminating Megan's figure as she moved purposefully through the trees, following a path that didn't exist on any map. She led me to another clearing, similar to the one I'd found her in before. In the center stood a crude altar made of stacked stones. Megan knelt before it, placing something on the top stone, a small cloth bag that looked identical to the one Eleanor had given me, the tea. I'd forgotten all about it, buried at the bottom of my pack. Megan began to speak in a language I didn't recognize, guttural sounds that seemed to hurt her throat. As she chanted, the air around the altar began to shimmer and distort. A figure was taking shape above the stones, tall and inhumanly thin, with limbs that bent at odd angles. It had no distinct features except for eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness. I must have made some small sound of terror, because Megan stopped abruptly and turned. For an instant, her face was overlaid with another, older, crueler, with too many teeth. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice once again layered with others. "Not yet. Eleanor will be displeased." I ran again, but this time the forest fought me. Branches reached down to claw at my face and hair, roots shifted beneath my feet, and twice I found myself turned around, heading back toward the clearing despite my desperate attempt to flee. When I finally reached our campsite, I grabbed my pack, not bothering with the tent or sleeping bag. I needed to get away, to find help, to somehow save Megan if there was anything left of her to save. But as I turned to leave, she was there, blocking my path. "You can't leave," she said pleasantly, as if we were discussing dinner plans. "Eleanor's coming. She wants to meet you properly." "That thing in the clearing," I said, backing away slowly. "What was it?" "Just a messenger," Megan replied, matching my movements. "Eleanor couldn't come herself yet. The binding is complex." "Binding?" "To this place, to the spring, to the sacrifices." Megan's smile widened. "She needs new vessels occasionally. Yours will do nicely." She lunged at me then, fingers curved into claws. I dodged, but she was faster than should have been possible, grabbing my hair and yanking me backward with inhuman strength. We grappled on the ground, rolling through the remains of our campfire. I felt hot ash against my skin but was too terrified to register the pain. Megan's face kept shifting. One moment my friend, the next, something ancient and malevolent. "Please," I gasped as her hands closed around my throat. "Megan, if you're in there, please fight it." For just a second, I saw confusion flicker in her eyes. A moment of my real friend surfacing. I used the hesitation to break free, scrambling for my pack. My hand closed around the first potential weapon I found, my heavy metal flashlight. I swung it with all my strength as Megan lunged again. There was a sickening crack as it connected with her temple and she crumpled to the ground. "Oh, God, Megan," I sobbed, dropping to my knees beside her. She was breathing, but unconscious, blood trickling from the wound on her head. I had to get help, but I couldn't leave her like this. Using the rope from our tent, I bound her wrists and ankles, hating myself for it but seeing no alternative. I dragged her into the tent, arranged her in recovery position and zipped it closed. Then I grabbed my pack and the journal and headed back the way we'd come, toward Eleanor's B&B. I didn't know what I'd do when I got there. But the journal had answers, and Eleanor was the source of whatever had taken hold of Megan. The forest seemed determined to prevent my escape. Paths that should have been straightforward twisted and doubled back on themselves. Landmarks I recognized appeared in impossible places. Time itself felt wrong. My watch showed only 10 minutes passing during what felt like hours of walking. Dawn was breaking when I finally stumbled onto Eleanor's property, exhaustion and terror pushing me to the edge of collapse. The house looked different in the early morning light, older, more decrepit, as if the well-maintained B&B had been a glamour that was now fading. I approached cautiously, clutching the ranger's journal like a talisman. The front door was unlocked, swinging open at my touch with a groan of ancient hinges. "Eleanor?" I called, my voice echoing in the empty foyer. The interior of the house was changed too. Dusty, cobwebbed, long abandoned. I moved deeper inside, following a sound I couldn't quite identify, a wet, rhythmic squelching coming from somewhere below. At the back of the kitchen, I found a door that led to stairs descending into darkness. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't leave without answers. Without finding a way to help Megan, I flicked on my flashlight and started down the stairs. The basement was a chamber of horrors. Glass jars lined rough wooden shelves, each containing what looked disturbingly like preserved human organs. Bundles of herbs and bones hung from the ceiling. In the center of the room stood a large stone basin filled with a thick, dark liquid that moved of its own accord. And there, beside it, stood Eleanor, but not the kindly innkeeper I'd met. This Eleanor was impossibly ancient, her skin like parchment stretched over bone, her eyes sunken pools of darkness, her fingers elongated into curved talons. "I wondered when you'd arrive," she said, her voice the rustling of dead leaves. "Your friend wasn't supposed to bring you to me so soon. The preparation wasn't complete." "What have you done to Megan?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Eleanor smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. "I've given her a great gift, my essence, my power, though she fights it still." She tilted her head, studying me. You are stronger than I anticipated. Most can't resist the calling of the spring, yet you never drank." "The Ranger's Journal," I said, holding it up. "He knew what you were." "Thomas," Eleanor nodded. "He was persistent. His life force sustained me for nearly a decade." My stomach churned. "You're a witch." "I am far older than that word," she corrected. "I was ancient when the first settlers came to these woods. They named this place for me, though they didn't know it. The Devil's Hop Yard." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Simple minds need simple explanations." "Let Megan go," I said. "Whatever you've done to her, undo it." Eleanor shook her head. "It's too late for that. The binding has begun. Soon she will be gone entirely, and I will wear her skin as I've worn so many others over the centuries." She gestured to the basin. "Each vessel eventually decays, you see. I need fresh blood, fresh life." As she spoke, I noticed something on a table behind her. A collection of small cloth bags identical to the one she'd given me. The tea. "Your friend is probably dead by now," Eleanor continued, moving toward me with an unnatural, gliding motion. "I felt the connection waver hours ago. No matter. You will do just as well." I backed away, my mind racing. The journal had mentioned symbols, a binding that kept Eleanor connected to this place, the carved trees I'd seen around our campsite, the altar in the clearing, all part of her magic. "You're bound to the spring," I said, playing for time. "You can't leave this forest." Eleanor's smile widened. "Clever girl. But I don't need to leave. The world comes to me, one hiker at a time." She lunged with shocking speed, her talons slashing toward my face. I ducked and rolled, coming up beside the table of herb bags. In one desperate move, I grabbed the edge of the table and upended it, sending the bags flying into the stone basin. Eleanor shrieked, a sound so inhuman it seemed to vibrate through my bones. The liquid in the basin began to bubble and steam, filling the room with a foul-smelling mist. "What have you done?" she howled, rushing toward the basin. I didn't wait to find out. I ran for the stairs, taking them two at a time, Eleanor's rage-filled screams pursuing me through the house and into the yard. Outside, the forest was transforming. Trees twisted and contorted, their branches reaching down like grasping hands. The ground beneath my feet trembled and split. From somewhere deep in the woods came an answering cry. Megan's voice, but distorted, agonized. I ran toward the sound, no longer caring about the paths, fighting through undergrowth and over fallen logs. I had to reach Megan before whatever link between her and Eleanor severed completely. I found our campsite destroyed, the tent shredded, our supplies scattered. Megan was gone, the ropes I'd bound her with lying empty on the ground. "Megan!" I shouted, spinning in a circle, searching the surrounding trees. A rustling behind me, and there she was, but barely recognizable. Her body was changing, elongating. Her skin stretched tight over rapidly shifting bones. Her eyes, when they met mine, were full of terror and pain. "Liv!" she gasped, her voice still her own. "Help me. She's trying to take over. I can feel her inside me." I rushed to her side, catching her as she fell to her knees. "What do I do? Tell me how to stop it." "The spring," she managed, her words interspersed with sounds of cracking bone as her body continued its grotesque transformation. "Destroy it. It's her source, her anchor." "Where?" I demanded, holding her face between my hands, trying to maintain eye contact as her features began to blur and shift. "Where is it?" Megan's arm rose, pointing deeper into the forest, then fell limply to her side. Her eyes rolled back and she convulsed in my arms. "I'll fix this," I promised, lowering her gently to the ground. "I'll come back for you." I followed the direction she'd indicated, moving as fast as I dared through the increasingly unstable forest. The ground heaved beneath my feet, trees groaned and split, and the air itself seemed charged with malevolent energy. I nearly fell into the spring when I found it. A perfectly circular pool of water, unnaturally still and clear despite the chaos around it. At its center, something glinted beneath the surface. A small, metallic object I couldn't quite make out. The water repelled me on some instinctive level, but I knew what I had to do. Steeling myself, I plunged my arms into the spring, reaching for the object at its bottom. The cold was immediate and shocking, a bone-deep chill that seemed to freeze my blood. Images flashed through my mind, centuries of victims, their life force drained to feed Eleanor's unnatural existence. I felt their terror, their confusion, their final moments of agony. My fingers closed around the object, a small silver amulet inscribed with symbols similar to those carved into the trees. As I pulled it from the water, the spring began to boil around my arms, the cold suddenly replaced by searing heat. I stumbled backward, clutching the amulet, my skin blistering from the abrupt temperature change. Behind me, Eleanor's voice rose in a howl of rage and fear. "No! Return it!" She stood at the edge of the clearing, no longer the elderly woman or even the ancient crone from the basement, but something barely human, her limbs impossibly elongated, her face stretched and distorted, her mouth a gaping maw filled with needle-like teeth. "You don't understand what you're doing," she hissed, her voice reverberating through the trees. "That amulet has sustained me for centuries. Without it, everything ends, including your precious friend." I clutched the amulet tighter, my burned arms screaming in protest. "You're killing her!" "I'm transforming her," Eleanor corrected, edging closer, "as I was transformed long ago. The process cannot be reversed now. Destroy the amulet, and you destroy us both." Doubt crept in. What if she was telling the truth? What if destroying the amulet would kill Megan too? Eleanor saw my hesitation and pressed her advantage. "Give it to me," she coaxed, her voice suddenly gentle. "I can save her. I can make her pain stop." For a moment I was tempted, but then I remembered the journal, the decades of disappearances, the preserved organs in her basement. Whatever she'd done to Megan, whatever she was, Eleanor Blackwood was evil in its purest form. "No," I said firmly, backing away. "This ends now." I raised the amulet, prepared to smash it against a nearby rock. Eleanor shrieked and launched herself at me, moving with inhuman speed. But before she reached me, another figure crashed into the clearing. Megan, or what remained of her. Her body was a horrific hybrid now, partly her own and partly something else. Limbs bent at unnatural angles, skin stretched and translucent, face elongated. But her eyes were still her own, filled with determination and pain. "Live," she gasped, her voice barely recognizable. "Do it, please." "It will kill you," I cried, tears streaming down my face. Megan's distorted features formed something like a smile. "Better than this." She threw herself at Eleanor, the two forms colliding and intertwining in a nightmarish tangle of limbs and flesh. They were connected, I realized, the transformation binding them together as Eleanor tried to consume Megan's essence. "Now!" Megan screamed, holding Eleanor immobilized in a grotesque embrace. I brought the amulet down hard against the rock. It cracked but didn't break. I struck again with desperate strength, and this time it shattered, releasing a blinding flash of greenish light and a sound like 1,000 voices screaming in unison. The force knocked me backward into the spring. The water, no longer clear but dark and viscous, closed over my head. I fought to the surface, gasping for air, just in time to see Eleanor and Megan consumed by whirling darkness. Eleanor's form was disintegrating, pieces of her flaking away like ash in a strong wind. She reached toward me with dissolving fingers, her face contorted in hatred and fear. "This isn't over," she snarled, her voice fading. "I've marked you. I'll find you again." Megan stood within the whirlwind, her body slowly returning to its human form as Eleanor's essence was torn away. Our eyes met one last time, and I saw gratitude in hers, alongside something else, a deep, irrevocable loss. "Thank you," she mouthed before the darkness engulfed them both completely. When it cleared, only Megan remained, crumpled on the forest floor like a discarded doll. I scrambled out of the spring, now just an ordinary pool of murky water, and ran to her side. She was breathing, barely, her pulse weak but present. Her body was her own again, but her eyes, when they fluttered open, were vacant. Empty windows to a mind that had retreated deep within itself. "Megan," I whispered, cradling her head. "Meg, can you hear me?" No response, just that empty stare, focused on something I couldn't see. It took me hours to get us out of the forest. The paths had returned to normal, but I was carrying Megan's dead weight, stopping frequently to rest my burned arms. By the time we reached the main trail, night had fallen again. A search party found us near dawn. Apparently, Eleanor's B&B didn't exist in any registry, and when we hadn't checked in at our first scheduled campsite, the park rangers had been alerted. I told them a simplified version of what had happened, that we'd gotten lost, that Megan had fallen and hit her head, that I'd burned my arms trying to build a fire. They didn't question it too deeply, concerned with getting us medical attention. Megan was admitted to a psychiatric facility after it became clear that whatever had happened to her mind wasn't going to resolve quickly. The doctors called it catatonic schizophrenia, induced by trauma. I didn't correct them. I visited her every week for months, sitting beside her bed, telling her about the outside world, hoping for some flicker of recognition. Occasionally, she would turn toward the sound of my voice, or her fingers would twitch in mine, but that was all. 6 months after what happened in Devil's Hop Yard, I moved away from Connecticut. The nightmares had become unbearable. Dreams of Eleanor emerging from mirrors, from shadows, from the depths of still water, her voice whispering that she was coming for me, that she had marked me, that what was hers would always return to her. I tried to convince myself they were just dreams, the product of trauma and guilt. But sometimes, when I looked in the mirror, I thought I caught a glimpse of something else looking back, something ancient and patient and hungry. The burns on my arms healed, but they left strange scars, patterns that resembled the symbols I'd seen carved into the trees that had decorated the silver amulet. They seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them, rearranging themselves into new configurations. Last week, I received a call from Megan's care facility. For the first time since that night, she had spoken. A single sentence repeated over and over, and "She's coming for Olivia." I packed a bag that night and have been moving ever since, never staying in one place for more than a day. I'm writing this in a motel room in some nameless town, the bathroom sink dripping steadily in the background. Earlier, I thought I saw the water turn clear for a moment, unnaturally clear, like the spring in Devil's Hop Yard. I don't know if Eleanor survived in some form, if some piece of her essence escaped the destruction of the amulet. I don't know if the dreams and the scars and Megan's warning are real or imagined, but I know I'll never feel safe near forests again. I'll never drink from a natural spring, never trust a stranger's kindness, never believe that the world is only what it appears to be. Because once you've glimpsed what lurks beneath the surface of reality, you can never unsee it. And sometimes, when you destroy a monster, you become marked by it, changed in ways you can't fully understand until it's too late. I think it's too late for me now. The dripping has stopped. In the silence, I can hear whispering, soft voices calling my name from the other side of the bathroom door, and I'm afraid that when I open it, I'll find Eleanor Blackwood waiting for me, smiling that too wide smile, her pale eyes reflecting a hunger centuries old. Or worse, I'll find Megan, returned from whatever mental prison she's been trapped in, but changed, coming to tell me that what Eleanor started was never truly finished. Either way, I think my time is running out. If anyone finds this account, stay away from Devil's Hop Yard State Park, stay away from springs that seem too clear, from kind strangers offering herbal tea, from paths that twist in ways they shouldn't. And if you ever meet a woman named Eleanor Blackwood, run. Run, and don't look back. Because she's patient, and she's hungry, and what belongs to her always returns in the end. My name is Olivia Winters, I'm 34 years old, and I don't think I'll live to see 35. My name is Thomas Elliott, I'm 34 years old. This happened in October of 2023, though sometimes it feels like I'm still living it. The autumn colors in Connecticut were at their peak when I convinced my friends to join me on what was supposed to be a 3-day hiking and camping trip through Devil's Hopyard State Park and the surrounding wilderness. Our little group from the accounting firm had been talking about getting away from spreadsheets and client meetings for months, but only 4 of us actually committed when the time came. Myself, Derek Wilson, Megan Chen, and Allison Novak. We all worked too much, stared at screens too long, and frankly, none of us were what you'd call outdoorsy. But that was part of the appeal. We wanted to disconnect, breathe real air, see real trees. Test ourselves a little. What a fucking mistake that was. I'd done my research, or so I thought. Devil's Hopyard wasn't particularly remote by Connecticut standards, but the eastern side had some lesser-traveled trails that connected to the Nahantic State Forest if you knew where to go. The area had some local legends about witchcraft and strange happenings, hence the name, but what wilderness area doesn't? I'd picked up a few trail maps and downloaded offline GPS routes to my phone. We had decent gear, nothing fancy but adequate for an autumn trip. Tents, sleeping bags, a camp stove, water filters, first aid kit. The basics. Derek was the most reluctant of our group. A cautious man by nature, he'd brought enough extra supplies to survive a minor apocalypse. Megan was the opposite, athletic, confident, always ready for a challenge. And Allison was our planner, the one who'd researched local wildlife and weather patterns, packed extra layers for everyone just in case, and brought a physical compass along with detailed topographical maps. "You never know when technology will fail you," she'd said while tucking the compass into her pack. I remember laughing at her paranoia. I'm not laughing anymore. The trip started normally enough. We left our cars at the official parking lot on a Friday morning, signed the trail register, and headed east on the Vista Trail, planning to eventually loop around to the Chapman Falls area where most tourists congregated. The weather was perfect. Crisp autumn air, clear skies, temperature in the high 50s. The forest was a riot of red and orange foliage, and the conversation flowed easily as we hiked. We stopped for lunch at an overlook, snapping photos and enjoying the sense of accomplishment that comes with elevation gain. Derek had already complained about his pack weight at least 5 times, but his mood improved with food in his stomach. Megan teased him about being soft, and Allison reminded us all about proper food storage to avoid attracting bears. "Did you know there are local stories about this place dating back to colonial times?" Megan asked as she munched on a protein bar. Supposedly, early settlers thought the devil himself created the potholes in the stream beds. "I read that too," I said, "and there were rumors of witches using the falls for rituals." Derek rolled his eyes. "Every New England forest has witch stories. It's practically required by law." "There's a local legend about someone called the Collector, who supposedly lives deep in these woods," Allison added. "Some hermit who collects things from hikers who pass through." "What, like a toll troll?" Derek laughed. "No, like personal items. Bits of clothing, jewelry, even hair. Supposedly as some kind of spell components," Allison said. "It's just a story to scare kids, but locals claim to have spotted an old woman living off the grid out here for decades." "Sounds like something the local Chamber of Commerce cooked up to attract tourists," I said. We finished lunch and continued along the trail, our packs feeling heavier after the break. The path gradually became less defined, and I had to check my phone's GPS more frequently. We were heading toward an area marked on my map as Witch Meadow, a small clearing where we planned to make camp for the night. By late afternoon, we'd covered about 8 miles. Everyone was tired, Derek was limping slightly from a developing blister, and we were ready to stop. Witch Meadow turned out to be a beautiful spot, a small grassy area surrounded by tall maple and oak trees, with a small stream at one edge providing a water source. "This is perfect," Megan said, dropping her pack with a satisfied groan. We set up our tents, one for Derek and me, another for Megan and Allison, and gathered firewood for the night. As the daylight faded, we got a small campfire going and prepared our freeze-dried meals. The conversation was subdued, all of us feeling the physical toll of the day's hike but satisfied with our progress. That first night was uneventful, aside from the strange dreams I had. I dreamt of an old woman watching us from the tree line, her face obscured by shadow, fingers twisting something in her hands. I woke once thinking I heard whispering outside the tent, but when I listened, there was only the rustle of leaves in the breeze and Derek's steady snoring beside me. The trouble began the next morning. Allison woke us at dawn, her voice tight with concern. "Did anyone go through my pack last night?" We gathered around as she emptied her backpack onto her sleeping pad. "My compass is missing, and so is one of my maps, the detailed one of this area." "Are you sure you packed it?" Derek asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Yes, I'm positive. I used it yesterday afternoon when we were deciding on the campsite." "Maybe it fell out when you were unpacking," I suggested. We searched the entire campsite, but the compass was nowhere to be found. It was odd, but not alarming. Not yet. We figured it had simply been misplaced and would turn up. After a quick breakfast, we broke camp and continued our trek. The plan was to hike another 7 miles to a spot near an abandoned fire tower where we would camp the second night. That's when we noticed the first real problem. My phone's GPS was glitching. The map would freeze, then jump to show us in completely different locations. Eventually, it died entirely, despite having been at 70% battery that morning. "No problem," I said, trying to hide my unease. "We still have the trail markers and Allison's backup maps." Except the trail markers became increasingly sparse, and then stopped altogether. We followed what looked like a path, but it gradually faded until we were essentially bushwhacking through the forest. "This doesn't look right," Megan said after we'd been hiking for about 3 hours. The trees had grown denser, blocking much of the sunlight, and the forest floor was covered in thick ferns and fallen logs. "Are you sure we're going the right way?" I wasn't sure at all, but I didn't want to admit it. "The fire tower should be northeast of here. We'll keep heading in this direction and should hit a proper trail soon." Derek pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. Allison consulted her remaining map, but without the compass, it was difficult to be certain of our orientation. "Let's take a break and figure this out," she suggested. We stopped in a small clearing. While the others rested, I climbed a slight rise to see if I could get a better view of our surroundings. From the top, I could see nothing but trees in all directions. No fire tower, no distinct landmarks, nothing to indicate which way we should go. As I turned to head back down, something caught my eye, a flash of movement among the trees. I squinted, trying to focus on the spot, and for just a moment I thought I saw a figure standing there, watching me. It was too distant to make out clearly, but something about its stillness made my skin crawl. "Hey!" I called out. "Hello? Is someone there?" No response. When I looked again, whatever I'd seen was gone. I rejoined the group and kept the sighting to myself, not wanting to alarm them. Instead, I suggested we use the sun's position to navigate northeast as best we could. The day wore on, and the forest seemed to grow more oppressive with each passing hour. The trees closed in around us. The bird sounds that had been plentiful the day before were now oddly absent, and we all felt the weight of being lost, though no one was willing to say it out loud. By late afternoon, Megan spotted what looked like the remnants of an old trail, and we followed it gratefully. It led us to a small valley with a stream running through it, not where we had intended to camp, but at least it had water. "Let's stop here for the night," I suggested. "We can reorient ourselves in the morning." Everyone agreed, too exhausted to argue. As we set up camp, Derek pulled me aside. "Tom, I don't think we're anywhere near where we plan to be," he whispered, his face tight with worry. "I think we're lost." "We're not lost," I insisted. "We're just off route." We'll figure it out tomorrow." My phone's GPS worked for a bit up on that ridge, and it showed us miles from the fire tower in a completely different direction. Before I could respond, Allison called us over. She was standing by her open backpack, her face pale. "Someone's been through my things again," she said. "My prescription medications are missing. All of them." We all stared at each other, the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. "I didn't take them," Megan said immediately. "Neither did I," Derek added. "Well, they didn't just walk away." Allison's voice had an edge of panic. I tried to defuse the situation. "Let's all empty our packs right now. The meds probably just got shifted around when we were hiking." We all dumped our backpacks, but Allison's medications, her asthma inhaler and anxiety pills, weren't among anyone's belongings. The mood in the camp darkened considerably. "Maybe an animal got into your pack?" Derek suggested weakly. Allison shook her head. "And took only my medications? Not the food, and zipped the compartment back up afterward?" We had no answer for that. As dusk fell, we built a fire, larger than necessary, all of us taking comfort in its light and warmth. We ate our dinner in uncomfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched from the darkness beyond our campsite. That night, none of us slept well. In our tent, Derek tossed and turned, mumbling in his sleep. Outside, the forest seemed alive with sounds, rustling leaves, cracking twigs, and occasionally what sounded disturbingly like footsteps circling our camp. At one point, I was certain I heard whispering, a soft, raspy voice speaking words I couldn't quite make out. I lay rigid in my sleeping bag, straining to listen, telling myself it was just the wind or my imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke with a start to Megan's scream. It was still dark, the pre-dawn hours when the night is at its blackest. I scrambled out of the tent, Derek right behind me. Megan was standing by the remains of our fire, pointing at something on the ground. In the dirt, illuminated by the beam of her headlamp, was Allison's missing compass. It was damaged, the glass face shattered, the needle removed. Next to it lay several pills from her medication, crushed to powder and arranged in a strange pattern. "What the hell?" Derek whispered. I looked around for Allison but didn't see her. "Where's Allison?" "Still in the tent, I think," Megan said, her voice shaking. "I got up to pee and found this." I walked over to the women's tent and called Allison's name. No response. I unzipped the tent flap and peered inside. Empty. Allison's sleeping bag was there, unzipped from the inside, but she was gone. "Allison!" I shouted into the darkness of the forest. "Allison!" Derek and Megan joined in, calling her name, our voices echoing through the trees. We searched the immediate area with our flashlights, finding nothing. "She wouldn't just wander off in the dark," Megan said, her face ghostly in the beam of her headlamp, "especially without her medications." "Maybe she heard something and went to check it out," Derek suggested, but even he didn't sound convinced. We spent the next hour searching, venturing further from camp in widening circles, calling Allison's name until our voices grew hoarse. The forest seemed to swallow our shouts, giving nothing back but eerie silence. As dawn finally broke, casting weak gray light through the trees, we gathered back at the campsite, exhausted and frightened. "We need to find the nearest ranger station or road," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Get help." "Which direction?" Megan asked. "We don't even know where we are." "East," I decided. "If we keep heading east, we'll eventually hit civilization. Connecticut isn't that big." We packed up quickly, leaving Allison's tent and sleeping bag set up in case she returned. On a piece of paper torn from my journal, I wrote a note explaining that we had gone for help and would be back. I weighted it down with a rock next to the compass and crushed pills, which none of us wanted to touch. As we were about to leave, Derek grabbed my arm. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the ground at the edge of our camp. There, in the soft earth, was a set of footprints. They weren't Allison's hiking boots. These were different, smaller, with an odd pattern on the sole. They led away from our camp into the forest. "Should we follow them?" Megan asked. I hesitated, then nodded. They might lead to Allison. The tracks were clear at first, but soon became harder to follow as the ground grew rockier. We kept going in the same general direction, calling Allison's name periodically. After about 20 minutes of walking, we entered a clearing unlike any we'd seen before. At its center stood an enormous oak tree, its trunk wider than any of the surrounding trees, its branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The grass beneath it was yellowed and dead in a perfect circle around the base, and hanging from the lower branches were objects, dozens of them. Small things at first glance, strips of cloth, bundles of twigs tied with hair, animal bones, and bits of metal that glinted in the morning light. As we moved closer, our horror grew. Among the hanging items were things that looked disturbingly like personal belongings. A watch with a broken strap, a single hiking boot, what appeared to be part of a torn backpack, a child's stuffed animal with one eye missing. "What the fuck is this?" Derek whispered, his face ashen. "We should go," Megan said urgently. "Now." But I was transfixed by something hanging from a branch at eye level, a small silver object that looked familiar. I stepped closer, reaching out to touch it. It was a charm bracelet. Allison's charm bracelet, the one she never took off because it had been a gift from her late mother. "Guys," I said, my voice barely audible, "this is Allison's." As if triggered by those words, a rustling sound came from the other side of the massive tree. We all froze. Slowly, a figure emerged from behind the trunk. For one hopeful, irrational moment, I thought it might be Allison. But it wasn't. It was an old woman, so ancient that her face was a map of deep wrinkles, her back bent with age. She wore what looked like layers of tattered clothing, patches of different materials sewn together haphazardly. Her white hair hung in matted strands around her face, and her eyes, God, her eyes were milky white, the irises barely visible. She smiled at us, revealing few teeth. "Visitors," she said, her voice a dry rasp that raised the hair on my arms. "It's been so long since I've had proper visitors." None of us spoke. None of us moved. "You're looking for your friend," the old woman continued, running a gnarled finger along the trunk of the oak. "The nervous one, always counting her steps, checking her little direction finder." "Where is she?" I managed to ask. The old woman's smile widened. "She's helping me with my collection. I've been the keeper of this place for so long, you see? The collector, some call me. Agnes Matheson is my true name, though it's been years since anyone's used it." "What did you do to her?" Megan demanded, her voice stronger than I expected. Agnes tilted her head, studying Megan like a curious insect. "Do? I simply showed her the way." She gestured to the hanging objects. "Everyone leaves something behind. A contribution. The forest demands it." "We're leaving," Derek said suddenly, backing away. "And we're taking Allison with us." Agnes laughed, a sound like dry leaves crumbling. "No one takes anything from my collection, but don't worry. She's not in pain. Not anymore." I felt sick, my mind racing with terrible possibilities. "Tell us where she is. Now." The old woman's milky eyes seemed to look through me rather than at me. "She's everywhere now. Part of the forest. Part of me." She raised a hand and I noticed she was wearing Allison's watch on her bony wrist. "Time works differently here, you see. I've been collecting for 300 years, by your counting." "That's impossible," Megan whispered. "Many impossible things live in these woods," Agnes replied. "The Devil's Hopyard, they call it now. In my day, it had an older name, a true name, a place where the veil is thin." She took a step toward us, and all three of us instinctively backed away. "You all need to leave something behind," she said, her voice suddenly harder. "A contribution. The forest has already taken some small things, a compass, some medicine. but it needs more. It always needs more. We're leaving, I said firmly, though my heart was hammering in my chest. All of us. And if you've hurt Allison, we're going to make sure you pay for it. Agnes's expression changed then, the false friendliness vanishing, replaced by something ancient and malevolent. "No one leaves without contributing," she snarled, her voice suddenly stronger. "The forest has chosen you. I have chosen you." She raised both arms, and the hanging objects began to sway, though there was no wind. The movement spread from one item to the next until the entire tree seemed alive with dancing trinkets. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing both Derek and Megan by their arms. "Now!" We turned and fled, crashing through the underbrush, not caring about the direction as long as it was away from that clearing. Behind us, I could hear Agnes calling out, her words unintelligible but the malice in them unmistakable. We ran until our lungs burned, until we could no longer hear anything but our own desperate breathing and the pounding of our feet on the forest floor. Finally, we collapsed beside a fallen log, gasping for air. "What the fuck was that?" Derek wheezed, his face red with exertion. "A crazy old woman," Megan said, though she sounded like she was trying to convince herself. Some homeless person living in the woods. I said nothing, trying to process what we'd seen. The tree with its grisly decorations. Agnes with her impossible claims. Allison's bracelet and watch. "We need to find help," I finally said. "A ranger station, a road, anything." "Which way?" Derek asked, looking around desperately. I had no idea. In our panic, we'd run blindly, without any thought to direction. The sky was overcast now, offering no help from the sun's position. "Let's keep moving," I decided. "Try to find higher ground. Maybe we can spot something." We walked for hours, the forest seeming to close in around us more with each passing mile. The trees grew denser, the undergrowth thicker. We had to fight our way through in places, our clothes catching on thorns, branches slapping at our faces. The day wore on, and we found nothing. No trails, no signs of civilization, not even a clearing large enough to give us a view of the surrounding terrain. It was as if the forest had swallowed us whole. Our water supplies ran low, then out. Hunger gnawed at our stomachs. Worst of all was the growing sense that we were going in circles. Certain trees, rock formations, fallen logs, they all started to look familiar, though it was impossible to be sure. By late afternoon, the panic we'd been suppressing began to surface. "This is insane," Derek said, sitting heavily on a rock, his head in his hands. "We should have hit something by now. A road, a house, anything." "Maybe we should try to find our way back to the campsite," Megan suggested, though she looked doubtful. "At least there's water there." I was about to respond when I noticed something on the ground nearby, a small pile of stones arranged in a triangle. It hadn't been there a moment ago. I was certain of it. "Did either of you do that?" I asked, pointing to the stones. They both looked, then shook their heads. "It's her," Derek whispered. "She's following us." "Don't be ridiculous," Megan snapped, but her voice trembled. "It's probably just hikers leave trail markers sometimes." "In the middle of nowhere?" I asked. We all fell silent, listening to the forest around us. It had grown quieter. No bird calls, no rustling of small animals in the undergrowth. Just the soft sighing of the wind through the trees. "Let's keep moving," I said finally. "We need to find water soon." We continued on, all of us jumping at every sound, our nerves frayed to breaking. The light began to fail, the forest growing darker beneath the dense canopy. We would have to stop soon, make camp for the night. The thought filled me with dread. Just as we were discussing where to stop, Derek suddenly froze, staring ahead. "Do you see that?" he whispered. At first I saw nothing. Then, through the trees, I caught a glimpse of light, not the warm glow of a campfire or the beam of a flashlight, but a pale, bluish illumination, like moonlight on water. "What is it?" Megan asked. "I don't know," I admitted, but it's the only thing we've seen all day that isn't trees. Should we check it out? We approached cautiously, the light growing stronger as we drew nearer. It seemed to be coming from a small hollow between two large rocks, shining up into the trees above. When we reached the edge of the hollow, we looked down to find the source of the light, and what we saw made no sense. It was a pool of water, perfectly circular, about 6 feet across. But it wasn't the water itself that glowed. It was what lay beneath the surface. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of small objects, all emitting that ghostly blue light. They shifted and moved as if alive, though nothing disturbed the surface of the water. "What are they?" Derek whispered, dropping to his knees at the edge of the pool for a closer look. I knelt beside him, trying to make out the objects. As my eyes adjusted, I could see that they were similar to the things hanging from Agnes's tree, personal items, trinkets, pieces of clothing, but these were all glowing with that eerie light. "Don't touch the water," I warned as Derek's hand hovered over the surface. Too late. His fingers dipped below the surface, reaching for something that had caught his eye. The moment his skin made contact with the water, the glow intensified dramatically, bathing us all in cold blue light. Derek gasped, not in pain but in surprise. It's warm," he said, his voice strange and distant. "And there's something." He reached deeper, his arms submerging up to the elbow. His face had gone slack, his eyes unfocused. "Derek!" I grabbed his shoulder, trying to pull him back. "Stop!" But he seemed not to hear me. With a sudden jerk, he plunged his entire arm into the water, his hand closing around something at the bottom of the pool. "I've got it," he murmured, his voice dreamy, disconnected. He pulled his arm back, water streaming from his sleeve. In his hand was a small object, a silver pendant on a broken chain. As Derek stared at it, mesmerized, the pendant began to glow more intensely than the other objects in the pool. A drop of water fell from it onto his wrist, and where it touched, his skin briefly glowed with the same blue light before fading. "Put it back," Megan urged, her voice tight with fear. "Derek, put it back now." Derek looked up at us and I recoiled. His eyes had changed, the whites now tinged with that same blue luminescence. His pupils dilated to the point where the iris was barely visible. "We need to keep these," he said, his voice still eerily calm. "She said we need to contribute. I think I understand now." "Who said?" I demanded. "Agnes?" Derek's head tilted as if listening to something we couldn't hear. "Not Agnes. The forest. The old ones who were here before." "Derek, you're scaring us," Megan said, reaching for the pendant. "Give me that thing." Derek's hand closed around the pendant and he backed away from us. "No, it's mine now. My contribution." He tucked the pendant into his pocket and stood up. "We should keep going. She's waiting for us." "Who's waiting?" I asked, though I feared I knew the answer. Derek smiled, an expression that didn't reach his changed eyes. "Allison. She's found her place. She wants to show us." My blood ran cold. Derek had always been the most rational of us, the most skeptical. Now he was talking like he wasn't Derek anymore. "Let's make camp here," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's getting dark. We're all exhausted and not thinking clearly." "No," Derek said firmly. "We need to go now. Follow me." He turned and began walking purposefully through the trees, in a direction we hadn't been heading before. Megan and I exchanged terrified glances. "What do we do?" she whispered. "We can't leave him," I said, "but I don't think we should follow him either. Maybe we can grab him, get that thing away from him?" I nodded. "Let's try. Be careful, though." We hurried after Derek, who was moving with surprising speed through the increasingly dark forest. When we caught up to him, I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Derek, buddy, stop for a second. Let's talk about this." He shrugged off my hand without breaking stride. "There's nothing to talk about. I see it clearly now. The forest provides for those who provide for it." "Derek, please," Megan tried. moving to block his path. "That pendant is doing something to you. You're not yourself." For a moment, Derek stopped looking at Megan with those disturbing blue-tinged eyes. Then, with shocking speed, he shoved her aside, sending her stumbling into a tree. "Don't interfere," he said, his voice no longer sounding like Derek at all. Deeper, resonant with something ancient and cold. I lunged at him then, trying to tackle him to the ground. We grappled briefly, but Derek was stronger than I'd ever known him to be. He threw me off with ease, and I landed hard on my back, the wind knocked out of me. "You'll understand soon," Derek said, looking down at me. "Both of you, when you make your contributions." With that, he turned and continued walking. Megan helped me to my feet, and we watched helplessly as Derek disappeared into the gathering darkness. "What do we do now?" Megan asked, her voice cracking. I had no good answer. Night was falling fast, and we were lost in a forest that increasingly felt like it was actively hostile to us. One friend was missing, presumed dead. Another had been transformed into something we didn't recognize. "We need to find shelter for the night," I finally said. "Make a fire if we can. Try to figure this out." We found a small hollow beneath an overhanging rock face, offering some protection from the elements and from watching eyes. We gathered what dry wood we could find in the fading light and managed to start a small fire using Derek's abandoned lighter. As we huddled beside the meager flames, neither of us spoke for a long time. The events of the day seemed too bizarre, too terrifying to process. "Do you think Allison is really—" Megan finally asked, unable to finish the sentence. "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever that old woman, Agnes, did to her, I think she's doing the same to Derek now." "Through that pendant," Megan said, nodding. "There was something wrong with that water. With all those glowing things. They looked like the objects hanging from her tree," I pointed out, "but transformed somehow." "Contributions," Megan whispered, recalling Agnes's words. "The forest demands it." We fell silent again, both of us staring into the fire as if it might hold answers. Around us, the forest had come alive with night sounds, the hooting of owls, the rustle of nocturnal creatures, the creaking of branches in the wind, and occasionally, distantly, what sounded like whispering. Despite our exhaustion, neither of us slept much that night. We took turns keeping watch, though we had no real plan for what to do if Agnes, or whatever Derek had become, found us. I was on watch, Megan finally having fallen into a fitful sleep, when I heard it, a twig snapping nearby, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching our shelter. I tensed, reaching for a heavy branch we'd kept by the fire as a makeshift weapon. The footsteps grew closer, deliberate and unhurried. A figure appeared at the edge of our firelight. For a moment, I thought it was Derek returning to us, but as it drew nearer, I saw that it was Allison. She looked wrong. Her clothes were the same ones she'd been wearing when she disappeared, but they were now stained with dirt and what looked like moss. Her hair hung in lank strands around her face, and her skin had a grayish cast to it. But it was her eyes that truly horrified me. They glowed with the same blue light as Derek's had, as the objects in the pool had. "Allison," I whispered, not wanting to wake Megan just yet. Allison's head tilted, her movements jerky and unnatural. "Thomas," she said, her voice a hollow echo of its former self. "I've been looking for you." "What happened to you?" I asked, gripping the branch tighter. "I've been shown the truth," she replied, taking another step closer. "The forest has accepted my contribution. It will accept yours, too." "Where's Derek?" Allison's face stretched into a smile that was not her own. "Preparing. The collector is teaching him." "Agnes," I said. "What is she? What has she done to you and Derek?" "Agnes is just a vessel," Allison said, her glowing eyes fixed on me. "Like I am now. Like Derek will be. Like you and Megan will be." "We're not going to be vessels for anything," I said firmly. Standing up straight, the branch raised slightly. "We're getting out of here, and we're taking you and Derek with us." Allison laughed, a sound that reminded me of Agnes's dry cackle. "You don't leave the forest leaves parts of itself in you." "Stay back," I warned as she took another step toward me. She ignored my warning, continuing to advance. I swung the branch in a wide arc, not aiming to hit her but to keep her at distance. She stopped, her head tilting again in that unnatural way. "You would harm me?" she asked, sounding genuinely curious. "Your friend." "You're not Allison," I said. "Not anymore." Behind me, Megan stirred, waking up. She gasped when she saw Allison standing there. "What's happening?" she asked, scrambling to her feet. "The collector sent me to guide you," Allison said, addressing both of us now. "To the heart of the forest, to the old oak." "The tree with all the contributions," I said. Allison nodded. "It's time for you to join us, to become part of something greater." "We're not going anywhere with you," Megan said, moving to stand beside me. "And we're not giving anything to that tree or to Agnes." Allison's face contorted, the false smile vanishing, replaced by something ancient and angry. "You don't have a choice," she snarled, her voice dropping to that same resonant tone Derek's had taken on. "The forest has marked you. It has tasted you already." She raised her hand, and in it was a small tuft of fabric. A piece torn from my jacket, I realized with a chill. Another contribution for the tree. "The collector knows your scent now," Allison continued. "She knows your fear. You cannot hide." As if on cue, we heard more footsteps approaching from different directions. Multiple sets surrounding our small shelter. "Run," I whispered to Megan. "Now!" We bolted from our makeshift camp, charging past Allison, who made a grab for my arm but missed. I could hear her behind us, calling out in that voice that wasn't hers, "You can't escape. The forest owns you now." We crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping our faces, thorns tearing at our clothes. Behind us, multiple footsteps pursued, some quick and light, others heavy and deliberate. I didn't dare look back, focusing only on putting one foot in front of the other, dragging Megan by the hand when she stumbled. The forest had grown impossibly dark, the trees looming overhead like sentinels, their branches reaching down as if trying to entangle us. The ground seemed to shift beneath our feet, roots appearing from nowhere to trip us, soft earth giving way unexpectedly. It was as if the forest itself was conspiring against our escape. "Thomas," Megan gasped, her breath coming in ragged bursts. I can't keep going like this." "We have to," I urged, pulling her along. "They're still behind us." We pushed on, our pace slowing as exhaustion and dehydration took their toll. The sounds of pursuit had faded somewhat, but I could still hear movement in the forest around us. Not directly behind us now, but to the sides, as if our pursuers were flanking us, herding us in a specific direction. The realization hit me with chilling clarity. They weren't just chasing us. They were driving us somewhere. "Wait," I said, pulling Megan to a stop. "We need to change direction. They're leading us somewhere." "Where?" she asked, bent over, hands on her knees as she struggled to catch her breath. "I don't know, but we need to break their pattern. Let's double back, try to circle around them." Megan nodded wearily, and we set off again, this time moving perpendicular to our previous path. It was slow going, the terrain becoming increasingly difficult, steeper, rockier, the undergrowth denser. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, we found ourselves at the base of a steep, rocky slope. It would be a difficult climb, but if we could make it to the top, we might get a better view of our surroundings, maybe even spot a road or building in the distance. "We need to go up," I said, pointing to the ridge above us. Megan looked at the slope dubiously but nodded. Anything's better than being hunted through the woods. We began to climb, using tree roots and rocky outcroppings as handholds. The slope was treacherous, loose stones sliding beneath our feet, sending small avalanches of debris down behind us. Our hands were soon scraped raw, our muscles burning with the effort. Halfway up, Megan slipped, crying out as she slid several feet down the slope before managing to catch herself on a root. "Megan!" I scrambled down to her. "Are you okay?" She grimaced, clutching her ankle. I twisted it. It's not broken, but she was cut off by a sound from below. Multiple footsteps. Closer now, and moving faster. "They heard us," I whispered. "We need to keep going." I helped Megan to her feet, letting her lean on me as we continued our ascent, slower now, more cautious. Her face was tight with pain, but she didn't complain, focusing all her energy on the climb. Finally, we reached the top of the ridge. The view was disappointing. More forest stretching in all directions, no sign of civilization. But at least we could see the terrain better. The land sloped down on the other side of the ridge into a narrow valley, through which a small stream flowed. In the pre-dawn light, the water gleamed like a silver thread among the trees. "Water," Megan said, hope in her voice for the first time in hours. "And if we follow it downstream, it might lead to a larger river, maybe even a road or town," I finished, nodding. "Let's go." We began our descent down the other side of the ridge, moving as quickly as Megan's injured ankle would allow. The slope was less steep here, the going easier. As we neared the bottom, the first rays of dawn were breaking through the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. We reached the stream and dropped to our knees beside it, scooping the cold, clear water to our mouths, not caring about filtration or purification. It was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. After slaking our thirst, we sat for a moment, gathering our strength. For the first time since Allison had disappeared, I felt a glimmer of hope. The stream was a lifeline, a path out of this nightmare. "Do you think we lost them?" Megan asked, looking back the way we had come. "I don't know," I admitted, "but if we keep moving downstream, we'll have the best chance of finding help." We followed the stream, Megan limping but determined. The early morning light filtered through the canopy, dappling the forest floor. Birds were beginning to sing, their cheerful notes at odds with the horror of our situation. The stream gradually widened, fed by smaller tributaries from the surrounding hills. The terrain became easier, the forest less dense. We began to make better time, both of us watching our surroundings warily for any sign of Agnes or our transformed friends. After about an hour of walking, the stream curved around a large outcropping of rock. As we rounded the bend, Megan suddenly stopped, grabbing my arm. "Thomas," she whispered, pointing ahead. "Look." There, not 50 yards downstream, was a bridge, a small wooden footbridge crossing the stream, and beyond it, what looked like a maintained trail. "Oh, thank God," I breathed, relief washing over me. "A real trail. It has to lead somewhere." We hurried toward the bridge, our spirits lifting with each step. The trail beyond was clearly marked with occasional signposts. We were back in controlled territory, away from the wild heart of the forest where Agnes ruled. As we stepped onto the bridge, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We were going to make it. We would find help, report Allison and Derek missing, bring back a search party. Halfway across the bridge, Megan suddenly stopped again. "Do you hear that?" I listened. At first, all I could hear was the gentle gurgle of the stream beneath us. Then, faintly, from somewhere downstream, voices. Human voices. "People," I said, hope surging. "There are people ahead." We continued across the bridge and onto the trail, following the sound of voices. The trail wound through the trees, gradually descending. The voices grew louder, more distinct, several people talking, occasional laughter. Then we smelled smoke. Not the wild smell of a forest fire, but the controlled scent of a campfire. And coffee. My God, someone was brewing coffee. We rounded a final bend in the trail, and there it was, a campsite. 3 tents set up around a fire pit, where a small breakfast fire burned. 4 people moved about the camp, packing gear, preparing food. Normal people, campers, salvation. "Hey," I called out, my voice cracking with emotion. "Hello, we need help." The campers looked up, startled by our sudden appearance. I could only imagine how we looked. Filthy, scratched, clothes torn, eyes wild with fear and exhaustion. A man stepped forward, concern on his face. "Are you two okay? What happened?" "We got lost," Megan said, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Two of our friends are missing. There's someone in the woods, a woman. She's dangerous." The man exchanged glances with his companions. One of them, a woman with short gray hair, approached us. "Come sit down," she said gently. "You both look exhausted. I'm a nurse. Let me take a look at those cuts, and you can tell us what happened." We allowed ourselves to be led to the fire. Given coffee and granola bars, our wounds cleaned and bandaged. They introduced themselves as a group of friends on their annual camping trip. Mark, the man who had first spoken to us, Sarah, the nurse, and a couple, Jim and Rachel. As we ate and drank, we told them our story about getting lost, Allison's disappearance, finding Agnes's tree, Derek's transformation, and our night-long flight through the forest. I could see the skepticism in their eyes, especially when we mentioned the glowing pool and Allison's changed appearance. "Listen," Mark said when we had finished, "I know these woods pretty well. There's no record of any hermit or woman living out here. Devil's Hop Yard is a well-traveled state park. Rangers patrol it regularly." "We weren't in the main park area," I insisted. "We were farther east, near the Nahantic Forest." "Even so," Mark continued, "what you're describing sounds... well, it sounds like you were both suffering from exhaustion and dehydration, maybe hallucinations. It happens to hikers more often than you'd think." "We weren't hallucinating," Megan said firmly. "Our friends are out there. They need help." Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Megan's arm. "We believe that you believe what you saw, and we will absolutely help you report your friends missing. There's a ranger station about 2 miles down this trail. We can go there together, get a search and rescue operation started." I wanted to argue, to make them understand that what we'd experienced was real, not some dehydration-induced fantasy, but I could see it was pointless. They had already decided what had happened to us, and nothing we said would change their minds. What mattered now was getting professional help to find Allison and Derek, or what remained of them. Mark had a trail map, which he spread out on a log for us to see. "We're here," he said, pointing to a spot on the map labeled 8 Mile River Campground. "The ranger station is here, at the park headquarters." I studied the map, trying to orient myself to figure out where we had been during our ordeal. It was impossible. The landmarks we'd encountered weren't on any marked trail. "How far are we from Witch Meadow?" I asked. "That's where we made our first camp." Mark frowned, scanning the map. "There's no Witch Meadow marked here. Are you sure that's what it was called?" "That's what it was labeled on my offline map," I said, though doubt was beginning to creep in. Had I misremembered? Had we been more lost than I thought? "Well, let's get you to the ranger station," Mark said, folding up his map. "They'll have better maps, and they can coordinate with state police to search for your friends." They broke camp efficiently, packing up their gear in under 30 minutes. Mark and Jim insisted on carrying our battered backpacks, while Sarah kept a close eye on Megan's injured ankle. Rachel, quieter than the others, kept glancing back the way we had come, as if expecting to see someone following us. The hike to the ranger station was mercifully uneventful. The trail was well maintained with clear markers at regular intervals. We passed several other hiking groups along the way, all of them giving us curious looks as they noticed our battered appearance. The ranger station was a welcome sight. A solid wooden building with a green roof, the state park logo prominently displayed. 2 ranger vehicles were parked outside, alongside a small visitor center. Inside, we were met by a ranger named Michael Sullivan, a stocky man with a salt and pepper beard and the weathered look of someone who had spent decades outdoors. He listened to our story with a professional attentiveness that was reassuring after the campers' skepticism. "So, your last known position was this campsite you call Witch Meadow," he said, spreading out a detailed topographical map of the park and surrounding areas. "And you think it was somewhere east of the main park, possibly bordering Nahantec State Forest?" "Yes," I said, trying to pinpoint it on his map. "We followed the Vista Trail east, then took what looked like a lesser-used path that branched off from it." Ranger Sullivan's brow furrowed as he studied the map. "There are some unofficial trails in that area. Locals' routes, hunters' paths, that sort of thing. Not marked on most maps. And you say 2 of your party are missing?" We nodded. And he pulled out a form. "I'll need their full names, descriptions, any identifying features, what they were wearing when you last saw them." We provided all the information we could, though I hesitated when asked to explain the circumstances of their disappearances. How could I tell this rational, professional man that one friend had vanished in the night and returned to something else, and another had transformed after touching a glowing pendant from an impossible pool? I settled for a sanitized version. Allison disappeared from our camp during the night. Derek went off looking for her the next day and didn't return. We got lost trying to find them. Ranger Sullivan nodded, making notes. "And you mentioned an older woman living in the woods, a hermit of some kind?" "Yes," Megan said. "She called herself Agnes Matheson. She said she was the collector, or keeper of the forest." Something changed in Sullivan's expression then. A subtle shift, a momentary stillness. He glanced at his colleague, a younger ranger who had been listening from nearby, then back to us. "Agnes Matheson," he repeated, his tone carefully neutral. "You're sure that was the name?" "Yes," I said, suddenly alert. "Do you know her?" Sullivan sighed, setting down his pen. "Not personally, no. But the name is, well, it's part of local lore. Agnes Matheson was supposedly a witch who lived in these woods back in the colonial days. According to the stories, she made a pact with the devil to live forever, in exchange for collecting tributes for him, possessions, body parts, eventually whole people." "That's just a campfire story, Mike," the younger ranger interrupted, looking uncomfortable. "Of course it is," Sullivan agreed quickly. "Just local folklore. No different from the stories about the devil making the potholes in the stream beds." But I could tell from his expression that he wasn't entirely dismissing it. There was something else. Something he wasn't telling us. "Have there been other disappearances?" I asked directly. "In that same area." Sullivan hesitated, then nodded. "There have been incidents over the years. Hikers who went missing and were never found. Most had logical explanations. People who went off trail, got lost, succumbed to the elements. But a few of the cases have remained unexplained." "And did any of the missing hikers report seeing an old woman before they disappeared?" Megan pressed. "Or a tree, with objects hanging from it?" "Not that was ever officially documented," Sullivan said carefully, "though there have been rumors. Stories passed around by search and rescue teams. Nothing that ever made it into official reports." He straightened up, his professional demeanor reasserting itself. "But what matters now is finding your friends. I'm going to call in a search and rescue team immediately. We'll need you to guide us back to your last known position if you're up to it." "Of course," I said. "Whatever it takes." Sullivan looked us over, noting our exhaustion and Megan's injured ankle. "But first, you two need medical attention and rest. I'm going to have you transported to Bacchus Hospital in Norwich. They'll check you over, treat that ankle properly, and give you a place to rest. Once you're cleared, we'll need your help with the search." Part of me wanted to protest, to insist on joining the search immediately, but I knew he was right. We were in no condition to hike back into those woods, and if we encountered Agnes or our transformed friends again, well, we needed to be at full strength. "Okay," I agreed, "but please start the search as soon as possible, if there's any chance they're still alive." "We'll begin immediately," Sullivan assured us. "I'm calling in teams from across the region. We take missing hikers very seriously, especially in that particular area." There it was again, that hint that he knew more than he was saying, that this wasn't the first time something strange had happened in those woods. Within an hour, we were in an ambulance headed for Bacchus Hospital. The paramedics gave us fluids through IVs, treated our various cuts and scrapes, and splinted Megan's ankle, which was indeed badly sprained but not broken. As we rode, watching the normal world pass by outside the windows, roads, houses, people going about their regular lives, the horror of what we'd experienced seemed to recede, becoming dreamlike, unreal. Had we really seen what we thought we'd seen? Or had Mark been right? Were we just suffering from exhaustion and dehydration? Our minds playing tricks on us? But then I would catch Megan's eye, and I knew she was thinking the same things I was. We hadn't imagined it. Something terrible lived in those woods, something that had taken Allison and Derek from us, something ancient and patient and hungry. At the hospital we were examined, treated, and given rooms to rest in. The police came to take our statements, going over the same ground we had covered with Ranger Sullivan, but with a more skeptical approach. I could tell they didn't believe much of our story, focusing instead on the practical aspects. When we had last seen our friends, what they were wearing, whether there had been any conflicts within the group before the disappearances. "Any chance your friends just decided to head back without you?" one officer asked. "Maybe they got tired of the trip, thought they could find their own way out." "No," I said firmly. "That's not what happened." The officer made a note, his expression neutral but disbelieving. When they left, a nurse brought us dinner and suggested we try to sleep. "The search and rescue team will want to talk to you in the morning," she said. "You need your rest." But sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Agnes's milky gaze, or Allison's blue glowing eyes, or Derek reaching into that impossible pool. I heard the whispers in the darkness, felt the forest closing in around me. Around midnight, there was a soft knock at my door. I opened it to find Megan standing there, her face pale in the dim hallway light. "I can't sleep," she said simply. "Me neither." She entered my room, and we sat together on the edge of the bed, finding comfort in each other's presence. After a while, she spoke. "Do you think they're still alive? Allison and Derek?" I hesitated, wanting to offer hope but unwilling to lie. "I don't know. Not as we knew them, I think. But maybe whatever happened to them can be reversed, if we find them in time." Megan nodded, though I could tell she didn't really believe it. Neither did I. "That ranger knew something," she said after another long silence. "Sullivan. He recognized the name Agnes Matheson right away." "I noticed that too," I agreed. "I think there have been other incidents, things that never made it into official reports. So why not tell us? Why not warn people? Would you believe it? A 300-year-old witch living in the woods, collecting tributes for the devil or the forest or whatever she serves? I wouldn't have believed it 3 days ago." Megan sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. "I suppose not. But still, people should know. People should be warned." "Maybe that's what we need to do," I said slowly. "When this is all over, tell our story. Make sure people know the truth about what's out there. If anyone believes us, someone will," I said, with more certainty than I felt. "Someone has to." We sat in silence for a while longer, then Megan returned to her own room. Neither of us slept much that night. The next morning, we were met by a state police detective and 2 members of the search and rescue team, including Ranger Sullivan. They had maps spread out on a table in a small conference room, and we spent hours going over the details of our hike, trying to pinpoint where we had been, where Allison had disappeared, where we had encountered Agnes and her tree of tributes. It was frustrating work. Without proper landmarks or trail markers, it was nearly impossible to identify the exact locations on the map. The forest we had been lost in seemed to exist in a space between the marked trails and known areas. "It's like trying to map a dream," I said in frustration after another failed attempt to locate the glowing pool we had found. Sullivan exchanged glances with one of the search team members. "There are areas of the forest that are difficult to map," he said carefully. "Locations that seem to shift, that hikers report finding once but never again." "What are you saying?" Megan asked. "Nothing official," Sullivan replied quickly. "Just that forests can be disorienting. Memory plays tricks. Two different people can experience the same trail differently." But there was more to it than that. I could see it in his eyes, in the way the other search team members shifted uncomfortably. They believed us, or at least they believed something of what we had experienced. The search for Allison and Derek began that afternoon, with teams deployed to the eastern edges of Devil's Hopyard State Park. Megan was still on crutches, unable to join, but I insisted on going along, despite the doctor's recommendation that I rest another day. "I need to be there," I told Sullivan. "I need to help find them." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Stay close to me," he said. "These woods can be tricky." We set out with a team of 6. Myself, Sullivan, 3 other rangers, and a state police officer. We were all equipped with radios, GPS devices, and detailed maps. Everyone carried extra water, first aid supplies, and emergency rations. They were taking no chances. We started from where Megan and I had emerged, the 8 Mile River campground, and worked our way back east, trying to retrace our steps. But nothing looked familiar to me. The forest seemed entirely different in daylight with a search team around me than it had during our desperate flight. We hiked for hours, checking off grid squares on their search map, calling Allison and Derek's names, finding nothing. No sign of our campsite, no trace of Agnes's tree with its grisly decorations, no glowing pool. Just normal Connecticut woodland, beautiful but unremarkable. By late afternoon, Sullivan called a halt. "We'll resume tomorrow at first light," he said. "Cover more ground to the north and east. For now, we head back." I wanted to protest, to keep searching, but I was exhausted, my muscles aching from the previous day's ordeal. Reluctantly, I agreed. As we turned to head back, I happened to glance down at a small bush near the trail. Something caught my eye, a tiny flash of silver among the leaves. I bent down to look more closely. It was a small silver charm in the shape of a 4-leaf clover, one of the charms from Allison's bracelet. "Sullivan," I called, my heart racing. "Over here, I found something." The ranger hurried over, kneeling beside me as I pointed out the charm. "It's from Allison's bracelet," I explained, "the one we saw hanging from Agnes's tree." Sullivan carefully picked up the charm with a gloved hand, examining it. "You're sure? It could be from any bracelet." "I'm sure," I insisted. "I recognized it at the tree, and I recognize it now. Allison never took that bracelet off. It was a gift from her mother before she died." Sullivan nodded, placing the charm in a small evidence bag. "Good eyes," he said. "This gives us a direction to focus on tomorrow." As he stood up, I noticed something else. His expression had changed, become more tense, more wary. He was looking around at the surrounding forest with new attention, his hand unconsciously moving to rest on his sidearm. "What is it?" I asked quietly. "Nothing," he said, but his eyes told a different story. "Just, we should get back before dark." The next day, the search expanded, with more personnel joining from neighboring counties. Helicopters scanned the forest from above, search dogs worked the ground, and teams methodically covered grid after grid of wilderness. I went out with Sullivan's team again, now focusing on the area where we had found the charm. The day was overcast, the forest darker and more oppressive under the gray sky. A light drizzle began around mid-morning, reducing visibility and making the search more difficult. We found nothing more that day, or the next. No further signs of Allison or Derek, no trace of Agnes or her tree of tributes. The search continued for a full week, gradually scaling back as hope diminished. Megan recovered enough to join us for the later searches, but even with both of us there, we couldn't locate any of the specific places we had encountered during our ordeal. It was as if that version of the forest had simply ceased to exist, or had withdrawn from the world of ordinary maps and GPS coordinates. On the 8th day, the official search was reduced to periodic patrols. Allison and Derek were officially classified as missing persons, their cases remaining open but active investigation suspended pending new information. Megan and I gave final statements to the police, collected our salvaged gear, and prepared to return to our normal lives, if that was even possible after what we had experienced. Before we left, Ranger Sullivan asked to speak with us privately. He met us at a small coffee shop in Norwich, away from the park and the other rangers. "I wanted to tell you," he began, his voice low, "that I believe you, about what you saw in those woods." We both stared at him, surprised by this admission after the official skepticism we had encountered. "You've worked here a long time," I guessed. He nodded. 26 years. Long enough to hear the stories. Long enough to see things myself, occasionally. "Agnes Matheson," Megan said. "She's real, isn't she? Not just a legend." Sullivan sighed, rubbing his beard thoughtfully. "I've never seen her myself. But over the years, there have been reports. Hikers claiming to have encountered an elderly woman living deep in the woods, far from any marked trail. Rangers finding strange arrangements of objects hung from trees. Personal items from missing hikers turning up in places they couldn't possibly have been. Why isn't this common knowledge?" I asked. "Why not warn people?" "What would we say? Beware of the immortal witch who might steal your possessions and your friends." Sullivan shook his head. "We'd be laughed out of our jobs. Besides, Devil's Hop Yard gets thousands of visitors every year. The vast majority have perfectly normal, safe experiences." "Except for the ones who don't," Megan said grimly. "Like us. Like Allison and Derek." Sullivan looked down at his coffee. "We do what we can. We emphasize trail safety, the buddy system, staying on marked paths. We patrol the areas where incidents have been reported in the past." "It's not enough," I said. "No," he agreed quietly. "It's not, but it's all we can do officially." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card with his personal cell number written on it. "If you ever remember anything else, anything that might help us find your friends, call me directly, day or night." We took the card, thanked him, and left. There was nothing more to say, nothing more to do. The forest had taken Allison and Derek, and all the search teams and helicopters and dogs in the world wouldn't find them if Agnes, or whatever force she served, didn't want them found. Megan and I returned to our apartments, our jobs, our normal lives. We tried to explain to our coworkers what had happened, sharing the sanitized version we had given the police. A hiking trip gone wrong. Friends who had wandered off and gotten lost. The sympathy was genuine but limited. People moved on quickly to office gossip and weekend plans. How could they understand? How could anyone who hadn't been there comprehend the horror of seeing your friend return with glowing eyes and a voice not their own? Of finding a tree decorated with the personal belongings of who knows how many missing hikers? Of being hunted through the night by something ancient and patient and hungry? Megan and I kept in touch, meeting for coffee or dinner periodically, bound by our shared experience in a way our other friendships could never match. We both had nightmares, dreams of being lost in endless woods, of Agnes's milky eyes watching us from the darkness, of Allison and Derek calling to us in those voices that weren't theirs. 3 months after our return, Megan called me late one night, her voice tight with fear. "Someone was in my apartment," she said without preamble. "They didn't take anything valuable, not my laptop or TV or jewelry, but what?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. "My hairbrush is missing," she whispered. "And a scarf I wore on the hiking trip. A scarf that was in my backpack in those woods." I felt cold all over. "Are you sure?" "Positive. And Thomas. I've been hearing things at night, whispering outside my bedroom window, even though I'm on the 4th floor. I told her to pack a bag, that I would come pick her up immediately. She could stay at my place while we figured out what to do next. As I was gathering my keys and wallet, I noticed something on my coffee table that hadn't been there when I'd gone to bed. A small tuft of fabric, torn from the jacket I'd worn on our hiking trip. The jacket that had been damaged during our flight through the forest. The jacket from which Agnes had already taken a piece as a contribution. My hands trembling, I picked it up. Beneath it was a small piece of paper with handwriting so ancient and spidery it was barely legible. The forest never forgets. The forest never forgives. The forest never stops collecting. I dropped the note as if it had burned me, backing away from it. Panic rose in my throat as I realized the full, horrible truth. Our escape had been temporary. Agnes, or the force she served, had always known where we were, had always been able to reach us, had simply been biding its time. We weren't safe. We had never been safe. The forest had followed us home, and I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that it would never stop hunting us until it had collected what it wanted, what it believed it was owed. Our contributions, ourselves. As I stood there, frozen in my living room, I heard it clearly for the first time since leaving those woods. The soft, insistent whispering that had haunted our nights in the forest. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, the words just on the edge of comprehensibility. But I understood enough. It was calling us back to Devil's Hop Yard, back to Agnes's Tree of Tributes, back to the heart of the forest that had claimed our friends and now reached out with patient, inexorable hunger for us. I grabbed my phone to call Megan, to warn her not to wait for me, to run, to get as far away as possible. But before I could dial, the screen lit up with a text message from an unknown number. "We miss you, Thomas. Allison misses you. Derek misses you. The collector misses you. Come home to the forest. Come home to us." Attached was a photo, a picture of Agnes's Tree of Tributes, its branches now decorated with familiar items. Megan's scarf, my jacket, Allison's bracelet, Derek's watch, and, hanging from the lowest branch, clearly visible in the strange blue glow that emanated from the tree itself, were 2 new additions: a pair of glasses identical to mine, and a driver's license with Megan's face. Objects we both still possessed, objects that couldn't possibly be hanging from that tree, unless the forest didn't care about simple constraints like time and possibility. Unless what we were seeing wasn't what had happened, but what would happen, what was already destined to happen. The phone fell from my nerveless fingers as the whispering grew louder, more insistent. And beneath it, almost too faint to hear, I could make out Allison's voice. Not the hollow, transformed version I had last heard in the forest, but her real voice, frightened and desperate. "Thomas, help us. Please, we're still here. We're still alive. Somewhere beneath. Please help us." I should have run. I should have grabbed Megan and fled as far as we could go, maybe to the other side of the country, or even another continent. But I knew it wouldn't matter. The forest had found us once. It would find us again. And Allison's plea echoed in my mind, impossible to ignore. So I picked up my phone, called Ranger Sullivan, and told him everything. About the missing items, the note, the text message with its impossible photo. I expected disbelief, maybe even concern for my mental state. Instead, after a long pause, he simply said, "I'll meet you at the park entrance in 2 hours. Come armed and bring supplies for 3 days. If your friends are still in there somewhere, we're going to find them." "And Agnes?" I asked. "The collector?" His voice hardened. "If she exists as you described her, if she's responsible for all the disappearances over the years, then it's time someone collected her." I picked up Megan, showed her the text and photo, told her Sullivan's plan. To my surprise, she didn't hesitate. "Let's finish this," she said, her face pale but determined. "One way or another." So here we are, driving back to Devil's Hop Yard State Park in the dead of night, armed with flashlights, knives, a shotgun borrowed from Sullivan's personal collection, extra batteries, water purification tablets, first aid kits, and a grim determination that none of us may make it out alive this time. Sullivan met us at the deserted parking lot. His official ranger uniform replaced by sturdy hiking clothes, a heavy pack on his back, a rifle slung over one shoulder. Two other men stood with him, Jim Townsend, another ranger who Sullivan vouched for as someone who's seen things, and Martin Cruz, a local guide who specialized in the less-traveled regions of Connecticut's state forests. These woods have been taking people for as long as there have been records, Martin told us as we checked our gear by the light of Sullivan's truck. Native tribes avoided this whole area, called it the Hungry Place, said it was where the Wendigo spirits lived. Wendigo? Megan asked. Cannibalistic forest spirits, Martin explained. Entities that consume not just bodies, but souls. The legends say they can take human form, or possess humans, make them hunger for things they shouldn't. I thought of Derek reaching into that glowing pool, of the change that had come over him. Sounds about right, I muttered. Sullivan finished distributing extra ammunition and emergency flares. We stick together, he said firmly. No matter what happens, no matter what we see or hear, we do not separate. Understood? We all nodded. If we find your friends and they're not themselves anymore, we'll do what we can to help them. But be prepared for the worst. His eyes met mine. They may be beyond saving. I understand, I said, though the thought of having to harm Allison or Derek made me physically ill. But if there's any chance they're still in there, still themselves underneath whatever's happened to them, we'll try, Sullivan promised. But our primary goal is to find the source, this Agnes, or whatever she truly is, whatever's been taking people from these woods for generations. And then? Megan asked. Sullivan patted the rifle at his side. Then we end it. We set out under a moonless sky, our way lit only by flashlights and the faint glow of stars between the trees. Sullivan led us along a trail I hadn't seen before, one that didn't appear on any of the official park maps. It was narrow and overgrown, clearly little used, winding its way eastward into the heart of the forest. Local hunters have used this path for generations, Martin explained quietly as we hiked. They call it the Witch's Road. Most won't set foot on it after dark. Why are we on it then? Megan asked. Because it leads to the places that don't appear on maps, Sullivan said from ahead of us. The places that shift and hide. The hungry places. We walked in silence after that, each lost in our own thoughts, our own fears. The forest around us seemed to grow denser, older, the trees packed more tightly together, their branches reaching out like grasping hands in the darkness. The normal night sounds, insects, small animals, the rustle of wind through leaves, gradually faded, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by our footsteps and breathing. After about 2 hours of hiking, Sullivan called a halt. We had reached a small clearing where the path forked, one branch continuing eastward, the other veering north. This is where it gets tricky, he said, his voice low. Past this point, compasses don't work reliably. GPS goes haywire. The paths seem to shift between visits. So, how do we navigate? I asked. Martin stepped forward, removing something from his pack. A small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols I didn't recognize. He opened it carefully to reveal what looked like a crude compass, but instead of a traditional needle, it held a small piece of dark metal suspended in some kind of liquid. Old magic, Martin said simply. Older than Agnes, older than the European settlers. The native people who lived here had ways of navigating the hungry places. I would have scoffed at such talk a few months ago. Now, I simply nodded. Will it lead us to Agnes? To that tree of hers? It will lead us to the heart of the disturbance, Martin replied. To where the world thins, where things cross over that shouldn't. And if Agnes is what we think she is, she'll be there, Sullivan added. Martin consulted his strange compass, the liquid within it swirling oddly, the metal fragment rotating until it pointed decidedly northwest, not along either fork of the path, but into the trackless forest between them. Of course, it couldn't be easy, Jim muttered, speaking for the first time since we'd set out. Nothing worth doing ever is, Sullivan replied grimly. Lights low from here on out. Move carefully and stay together. We left the path, plunging into the dense undergrowth, Martin in the lead now, consulting his wooden compass frequently. Sullivan came next, then Megan and me, with Jim bringing up the rear. Our progress was slow, difficult, each step a conscious effort through the tangled ferns and fallen branches that seemed to catch at our ankles, trying to hold us back. The forest had changed character entirely now. The trees older, more gnarled, with thick, ropey vines hanging between them. Patches of strange, luminous fungi clung to the trunks, giving off a faint, sickly green glow that cast weird shadows across the forest floor. The air felt thick, heavy with moisture and the scent of decay. "We're getting close to something," Martin whispered after nearly an hour of this difficult travel. "The needle's going crazy." We gathered around him, watching as the metal fragment in his compass spun rapidly, the liquid bubbling slightly as if being heated from below. "What does that mean?" Megan asked. Martin's weathered face was grave in the dim light of our flashlights. "It means we're at a boundary, a place where our world meets somewhere else." "Another dimension?" Jim asked skeptically. "Call it what you want," Martin replied. "The old tribes had different names for it. The Hungry Land, the Spirit World, the place between. What matters is that it's dangerous, and things can cross over from there to here and back again." "Things like Agnes," I murmured. Martin nodded. "Or whatever wears her shape." Sullivan checked his rifle, making sure a round was chambered. "How do we cross over? Find where she's hiding?" "We don't have to," Martin said, his voice hushed. "Look." He pointed ahead to where the trees seemed to thin out into another clearing. But this one wasn't natural. The trees at its edge were bent and twisted, their trunks warped as if they had grown around some invisible barrier. And in the center of the clearing, barely visible in the gloom, stood an enormous oak tree, its branches reaching out in all directions like the limbs of some monstrous spider. And hanging from those branches, swaying gently though there was no wind, were hundreds of objects, each catching and reflecting the faint light of our flashlights. "The tribute tree," I whispered, my throat suddenly dry. We approached cautiously, weapons ready, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. As we drew closer, the details of the hanging objects became clearer. Watches, jewelry, scraps of clothing, hiking boots, backpacks, cameras. Personal items from countless hikers who had vanished in these woods over the years, decades, perhaps centuries. And not just inanimate objects. Among the branches hung things that made my stomach lurch. What looked like locks of hair tied with twine, bundles of fingernails bound together with wire, small bones strung like macabre wind chimes. "Jesus Christ," Jim breathed, his face ashen in the dim light. "Don't touch anything," Sullivan warned. "Don't even get too close." We formed a loose semicircle around the tree, our flashlights playing over its grotesque decorations. I searched the branches for the items I had seen in the photo Agnes had sent to my phone. Megan's scarf, my jacket, Allison's bracelet, Derek's watch. There they were, hanging from a lower branch on the far side of the tree. And beside them, just as in the photo, were my glasses and Megan's driver's license. Things we still possessed that couldn't possibly be here. "How?" Megan began, staring at her license, swinging gently from a small hook fashioned from bone. "Time works differently here," came a familiar voice from behind the massive trunk. "Past, present, future, all the same to the forest." Agnes stepped into view, looking exactly as she had when we first encountered her. Ancient, bent, her white hair hanging in matted strands around her milky eyes. She wore the same patchwork clothing, but now I could see that what I had taken for different fabrics were actually pieces of clothing from different eras. denim alongside homespun cotton alongside what looked like deerskin. "Agnes Matheson," Sullivan said, raising his rifle slightly. "Or whatever you really are." Agnes smiled, revealing those few remaining teeth. "I've been called many names over the centuries. Agnes is as good as any." "Where are our friends?" I demanded. "Allison and Derek. What have you done with them?" "They're here," Agnes replied, gesturing vaguely at the tree behind her. "Part of my collection now. Part of the forest." "What does that mean?" Megan asked, her voice tight with anger and fear. "It means they've been consumed," Agnes said matter-of-factly. "Their bodies, their spirits, their essence, all feed the hunger of this place, of the old ones who dwell here." "The Wendigo," Martin murmured. Agnes's milk-white eyes turned to him. "You know the old stories. Good. Then you know what happens to those who trespass here, who are chosen as tribute." "We're taking our friends back," I said firmly, "and we're putting an end to whatever you've been doing in these woods." Agnes laughed, that same dry sound like crumbling leaves. "You cannot take what has already been given. You cannot stop what has existed since before your kind learned to make fire." "We'll see about that," Sullivan said, his rifle now pointed squarely at Agnes's chest. She seemed unconcerned by the weapon. "Your metal and powder have no power here, Ranger. This is not your world anymore. You crossed the boundary when you entered this clearing." As if to emphasize her point, she gestured to the sky above us. Where there should have been stars visible between the branches, there was only a swirling darkness, like smoke or fog but thicker, more substantial, moving with purpose and intent. "What is this place?" Jim asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The feeding ground," Agnes replied. "Where the hungry ones consume what I collect for them. Where your friends now dwell, their essence slowly being devoured, their bodies transformed into vessels." "Vessels for what?" Megan demanded. Before Agnes could answer, there was movement from the far side of the clearing. Two figures emerged from the darkness between the trees, Allison and Derek, but not as we had known them. Their skin had a grayish cast in the beam of our flashlights, their movements jerky and unnatural, and their eyes, those familiar blue-glowing eyes, flat and emotionless. "For us," Allison said, but the voice wasn't hers. It was deeper, older, resonating with the same ancient quality as Agnes's voice. "For the hungry ones." "We feed," Derek added, his voice similarly transformed. "We consume. We grow." They began to advance toward us, moving with an eerie coordination, like puppets controlled by the same hand. Sullivan swung his rifle to cover them, while Jim raised a heavy flashlight as if it were a club. "Stay back," Sullivan shouted. "Don't come any closer." They ignored his warning, continuing their steady approach. I looked at their faces. Faces I had known for years. Faces of friends I had worked with, laughed with, shared meals with, now devoid of any recognition, any humanity. "Shoot them," Martin urged Sullivan. "They're not your friends anymore. They're just vessels now." But Sullivan hesitated, the rifle wavering slightly. "I can't just—" "We need to try to save them," I insisted. "There must be a way to reverse this, to get them back." Agnes laughed again, the sound echoing strangely in the clearing. "There is no back. There is only forward, into hunger, into consumption, into the service of the old ones." She raised her gnarled hands, and all around the clearing, the hanging objects began to sway more violently, though still there was no wind. A low humming filled the air, like thousands of insects buzzing just at the threshold of hearing. "The forest has chosen you all," Agnes continued, "just as it chose me, centuries ago, just as it chose your friends. The hungry ones must feed, and I must provide." As she spoke, the swirling darkness above us began to descend, tendrils of it reaching down like probing fingers toward our group. And within that darkness, I could see shapes forming, vague, half-seen things with too many limbs, too many angles, moving in ways that hurt the eye to follow. "The Wendigo spirits," Martin whispered, backing away. "They're coming through." Sullivan finally overcame his hesitation, firing a shot at Agnes. The rifle's report was strangely muffled in the thick air of the clearing, and the bullet seemed to slow as it approached her, finally stopping altogether a few inches from her chest, hanging suspended in the air. "I told you," she said calmly. "Your weapons have no power here." The bullet dropped to the ground, harmless. "Run!" Jim shouted, turning to flee back the way we had come. But as he reached the edge of the clearing, the trees seemed to shift and move, their trunks flowing together like liquid, blocking his path. He rebounded off them, falling back into the clearing. "There is no escape," Agnes said, almost kindly. "Only acceptance, only submission to the hunger." Allison and Derek had nearly reached us now, their arms outstretched, those glowing eyes fixed on us with terrible purpose. Above us, the dark shapes in the swirling blackness were becoming more distinct, more substantial, nightmarish forms with antlers like knives, limbs too long and jointed in too many places, mouths that opened wider than any mouth should. We were trapped, our weapons useless, our escape blocked. The Wendigo spirits descending from above, our transformed friends advancing from the sides, Agnes watching it all with those milky, ancient eyes. It was Megan who acted first. While the rest of us stood frozen in horror, she lunged forward, snatching something from her pocket, her cigarette lighter. Before anyone could stop her, she flicked it to life and thrust the flame into the lowest hanging tributes on Agnes's tree. The dry fabric caught immediately, the fire spreading with unnatural speed, racing up the branches from one hanging object to the next. Within seconds, the entire lower portion of the tree was ablaze, the fire casting wild, dancing shadows across the clearing. Agnes screamed, not in pain, but in rage, a sound that seemed to come from the forest itself rather than from her withered form. "What have you done?" she shrieked. "The tributes! The anchors!" The flames climbed higher, consuming watches, clothing, the grotesque bundles of hair and nails and bone. And as they burned, something strange happened to the swirling darkness above. It began to churn more violently, the shapes within it writhing as if in agony. "The tributes anchor them here," Martin shouted over Agnes's continued screams. "They're the connection, the doorway." Understanding dawned. The personal items Agnes collected weren't just trophies. They were links, physical connections to our world that allowed the Wendigo spirits to manifest, to feed through her. "Burn it all," Sullivan ordered, pulling out his own lighter and igniting another section of the tree. Jim followed suit with a Zippo from his pocket, and I used the matches from my emergency kit. Soon, the entire massive oak was engulfed in flames that burned with unnatural colors, not just orange and red, but blue and green and purple, as if the fire itself was consuming more than just physical matter. The effect on Agnes was immediate and horrifying. As the tributes burned, her form seemed to waver, to become less substantial. Her skin began to sag and droop, not like melting wax, but like a balloon, slowly deflating. Her screams took on a desperate, pleading quality. "No, not yet. I've served faithfully. I've provided. I've fed the hunger." But whatever entities she had served for centuries were not inclined to mercy. As their anchors to our world burned away, the darkness above began to coalesce around Agnes, those half-seen shapes with their too many limbs and knife-like antlers descending upon her. She reached out toward us, her form continuing to collapse in on itself. "Please, don't let them take me back. Not like this." None of us moved to help her. We watched in horrified fascination as the darkness enveloped her, her screams rising to an impossible pitch before cutting off abruptly. For a moment, the darkness contracted into a tight ball where she had stood, then it exploded outward with a sound like thunder, a blast of cold air that nearly knocked us off our feet. And Agnes was gone. But Allison and Derek remained, still advancing toward us with those glowing eyes and jerky movements. The fire raged behind them, consuming the tribute tree, sending sparks and burning fragments high into the night sky. "What about them?" Megan cried. "Why aren't they changing back?" "They've already been transformed," Martin said grimly, "already consumed and remade. The vessels remain even when the spirits depart." "No, I refuse to accept it. There must be something of them left, some part that's still Allison and Derek." I stepped forward, ignoring Sullivan's warning shout, approaching my transformed friends. "Allison, Derek, it's me, Thomas. You know me. We've worked together for years. We're friends." For a moment, there was no reaction, their expressions remaining blank, those glowing eyes fixed on me without recognition. Then, almost imperceptibly, Derek's head tilted slightly, a flicker of something, confusion, awareness, crossing his face. "That's it," I pressed. "Derek, remember the office Christmas party last year? You got so drunk you tried to photocopy your face? Remember how we had to help you home?" Another flicker, stronger this time. His steps faltered. I turned to Allison. "Allison, remember how you keep your desk so perfectly organized? How you always bring those amazing cinnamon rolls on Fridays? Remember how you talked about visiting your sister in California next summer?" Something changed in her expression, too. A momentary softening, a brief dimming of the unnatural glow in her eyes. "They're still in there," I said over my shoulder to the others. "Part of them, at least. We can reach them." I continued talking, reminding them of shared experiences, inside jokes, personal details that only I would know about them. With each memory, each personal connection, the glow in their eyes dimmed further, their movements becoming less mechanical, more human. Behind them, the great oak had become a roaring inferno, the flames now reaching higher than the surrounding trees. The hanging tributes were almost entirely consumed, and with them, whatever doorway had allowed the Wendigo spirits to enter our world. The oppressive atmosphere in the clearing was lifting, the air becoming clearer, more normal. And as the last of the tributes burned away to ash, Allison and Derek collapsed to the ground like marionettes whose strings had been cut. We rushed to them, checking for pulses, for any sign of life. They were breathing, but barely, their skin cold and clammy to the touch. The blue glow had faded from their eyes, which were now closed as if in deep sleep. "They need medical attention," Sullivan said, kneeling beside them. "We need to get them out of here, fast." "Can we move them?" Megan asked. "We have to try," I replied. "The fire's spreading." Indeed, the blaze had begun to jump to neighboring trees, the entire clearing now illuminated by the growing inferno. The heat was becoming intense, forcing us to back away from the burning oak. Between the 5 of us, we managed to fashion crude stretchers using our jackets and branches cut from nearby trees. We secured Allison and Derek as best we could, then began the difficult task of carrying them out of the clearing. To our surprise, the trees that had shifted to block Jim's escape earlier now stood normally, the path we had taken clearly visible in the firelight. It was as if, with Agnes's destruction and the burning of the tributes, whatever power had held this place apart from the normal world had broken. Our journey back was arduous but straightforward. No mysterious paths that shifted, no sense of being watched from the darkness. Just a difficult hike through normal Connecticut woodland, burdened by the weight of our unconscious friends. We reached Sullivan's truck just as dawn was breaking, loading Allison and Derek into the back. Sullivan and Jim would take them directly to the hospital, while Martin would drive Megan and me in his own vehicle. "What do we tell the doctors?" Megan asked as we prepared to part ways. "About what happened to them." "Exposure," Sullivan said firmly. "Dehydration. Shock from being lost in the woods for so long. Nothing about glowing eyes or Wendigo spirits or 300-year-old witches." "And when they wake up?" I asked. "If they remember what happened to them?" Sullivan's expression was grim. "Then you be there for them. Help them understand. Help them cope. But keep it private. The world isn't ready for the truth about places like that clearing, about things like Agnes and what she served." "What about the fire?" Megan asked. "It was spreading rapidly when we left. "I'll call it in," Sullivan assured her. "But given the recent rainfall, it's likely to burn itself out before it does too much damage, and if it takes that clearing with it, so much the better." We parted ways then, exhausted beyond words, still struggling to process what we had experienced, what we had survived. The ride back to the city with Martin was mostly silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Allison and Derek remained unconscious for 3 days in the hospital. The doctors were baffled by their condition. Physically, they showed signs of extreme exhaustion and malnutrition. But there was also something else, something the medical tests couldn't identify. "It's as if their central nervous systems experienced some kind of massive shock," one doctor explained. "Almost like an electrical injury, but without any entry or exit wounds." Megan and I took turns sitting with them, waiting for them to wake up, dreading what they might remember when they did. Allison was the first to regain consciousness, her eyes fluttering open on the morning of the 4th day. I was alone with her when it happened, Megan having gone to get coffee from the hospital cafeteria. "Thomas?" she whispered, her voice weak and raspy from disuse. "I'm here," I said, taking her hand gently. "You're safe now. You're in the hospital." Her eyes, normal, human eyes, no trace of that eerie blue glow, darted around the room in confusion. How did I get here? What happened? What do you remember?" I asked carefully. She frowned, concentrating. "We were camping. Devil's Hop Yard. I got up in the night, thought I heard something outside the tent." Her frown deepened. "There was an old woman. She touched me, and then—" She trailed off, her expression becoming distant, troubled. "Then it gets strange, like a nightmare. I was still me, but not me. I could see everything, hear everything, but couldn't control anything. And there was something else there, inside with me. Something hungry." Tears filled her eyes. Did I hurt anyone? I remember wanting to. No, not me. It wanted to. Through me. "You didn't hurt anyone," I assured her, squeezing her hand. "It wasn't your fault. None of it was." Derek woke a few hours later, his experience similar to Allison's. Fragmented memories of being taken by Agnes, of being transformed into a vessel for something ancient and malevolent, of watching helplessly as his body was used by something else. Both of them remembered the fire, the burning tree, the destruction of the tributes. "It was like being set free," Derek said, "like chains breaking. But I was sure I was going to die. That we both were." "You almost did," Megan told him. "The doctors still don't fully understand what happened to you." We told them a simplified version of our return to the forest, of confronting Agnes, of destroying the tribute tree that anchored the Wendigo spirits to our world. We explained how we had reached the human parts of them that remained, drawn them back from whatever abyss they had been pushed into. "Will they come back?" Allison asked, fear evident in her voice. "Those things. Will they find us again?" "I don't think so," I said, though I couldn't be entirely sure. Their connection to our world was through Agnes and her tributes, with both gone. "But there could be others," Derek pointed out. "Other collectors, other hungry places." None of us had an answer for that. The official story, as agreed upon with Sullivan, was that Allison and Derek had gotten lost in the woods, become separated from us, and survived on their own until the search team found them, severely dehydrated and suffering from exposure. No one questioned it too deeply. Such things happen to inexperienced hikers all the time. We were all placed on medical leave from work, given time to recover from our ordeal, which was good because the true recovery, the psychological healing from what we had experienced, would take much longer than any physical wounds. We stayed in touch with Ranger Sullivan, who reported that the fire had indeed burned itself out after consuming about 5 acres of woodland, including, notably, the clearing with the great oak. "Nothing left but ash," he told us. "No sign of the tree, the tributes, or Agnes." Martin, the local guide who had helped us, Visited once while Allison and Derek were still in the hospital. He brought each of us small protective charms, simple leather pouches containing what he described as old medicine. Just in case, he said, refusing to elaborate further. Some hungers never truly die, they just sleep for a while. It's been 6 months now since that final confrontation in the clearing. Allison and Derek have recovered physically, though they both still have nightmares, still wake up sometimes convinced they can feel something else inside them, watching through their eyes. We all do. We formed a kind of support group, the 4 of us, meeting regularly, talking through what happened, helping each other cope with the knowledge that the world is not as simple, as safe, as we once believed it to be. That ancient, hungry things exist in the shadows and forgotten places. That some forests are best left unexplored. I still carry Martin's charm with me everywhere I go. We all do, and none of us has set foot in any woodland since our return. The thought of trees closing in around us, of paths that shift and change, of whispers in the darkness. It's too much to bear. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I think I can still hear those whispers, the soft, insistent voices of the hungry ones, calling from across some unimaginable gulf, telling me that they remember me, that Agnes may be gone, but the hunger remains, that the forest never truly forgets. And on those nights, I hold Martin's charm tightly in my fist and I stay awake until dawn, watching the shadows in my room, listening for footsteps that move with jerky, unnatural rhythm, for the soft sound of something being hung from a branch, waiting for the hunger to find me again. Because deep down, I know the truth that Sullivan and Martin tried to shield us from. This isn't over. The forest tasted us, marked us, and sooner or later it will come to collect what it believes it is owed. Our contributions, our essence, ourselves. And when it does, I don't know if we'll be strong enough to escape a second time. The forest is patient. The forest is eternal. And the forest is always hungry